Coming to you from Blue Crew Studio in Temecula, California, it's the Whiskey Throttle Show. Taking you inside the lives of the legends and leaders in moto and action sports. Today's guest is brought to you by Yamaha. Yamaha is the industry leader in two-wheeled fun and performance. Celebrating 50 years of YZ in 2024, the Blue Crew is still dominating shootouts and competitions. Yamaha, revs your heart. SKDA is the leader in motorcycle graphics. Driven by a combined passion for art and motorcycles, SKDA has become a global leader in the off-road motorcycle space. Their graphics can be spotted from a mile away with a unique design that blends speed and creativity. SKDA, search and supply of true art within moto. Troy Lee Designs, built for the world's fastest racers. TLD blends elite level protection with industry-leading style and performance. Moto, bike, helmet paint, casual wear, whatever your passion, Troy Lee Designs is waiting for you on the next level. Nihilo Concepts. Enhance your riding experience with superior products like the Start-Stop Conversion Kit, Fuel Petcocks, Frame Grip Tape, Lever Grip, Grip Donuts, Secondary On Switch, Billet Foot Pegs, Billet Throttle Housings, and so much more. Nihilo Concepts produces exceptional products, all of which are made right here in America. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here in Blue Crew Studios for the Whiskey Throttle Show. Really fun episode planned today. I'm excited for this one. You guys may or may not be familiar with R&D Racing, but what a storied history these guys have in the sport of motocross. And the guy behind it, the man behind the tuning bench, Dean Dickinson. Dean, thanks for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. You know, I think I've got this special place in kind of moto history for me as far as my life with R&D, because one of the first amateur nationals I went to, which I think I met you in 1985 at the World Mini, just watching you guys and your operation just blew my mind. It was, as a kid from Montana, it was so far out of the realm of anything I'd ever seen. And I've just been kind of infatuated with you guys and your brand ever since. So I'm excited to have you on. So thanks for coming. We start with the Nihilo Concepts front-end chatter. You guys know about this. Nihilo Concepts makes all kinds of hard parts and cool parts for your bike, including the Nano Tuner. Check that out if you're having trouble figuring out what's wrong with your four-stroke fuel injection. They can help. And they've got all kinds of great products. So check those guys out. I think you're probably, at least for me, again, maybe a lot of this is probably going to reference back to my interactions with you, but you were really known as being a Suzuki guy for a long time. And so I wonder if you have a soft spot for that brand. You got a little yellow magic under the collar all the time?
It's mostly the people I got to work with. That's always it. And I had some really special relationships there, and they treated me well. I mean, for a guy that could barely read, they took good care of me.
Well, I think you did some pretty good work for them, and I'm excited to tell all those stories. What do you see happening with that company now? I mean, is it odd to you,
I don't know much about it, but what I did hear, not sure if it's accurate, but seemed like they have a boat division, and the motorcycle and then the car. And I was under the impression that all those bank accounts were one. And so when one thing takes a tumble, everybody goes with it. Don't know if that's true.
Well, I suppose, Suzuki Japan is even though there are other divisions, there's American Suzuki, right, and all these other ones, which they closed their car division here in the U.S. But if you go a lot of other places in the world, those small little Suzuki cars, they sell a lot of them. And the Marine division's huge. They're one of the best, outboard engines in that world.
Didn't something happen where they got thrown under the bus in the media with a car that turned over or something? And that didn't help them. Yeah,
there was a Samurai, and it was just a short little guy. Again, great for inner city stuff, or there's a lot of mountain communities that still track those down and use them because they're four-wheel drive. They're very versatile. They're small, but they had a tendency, if you took a turn at high speed, to roll. So maybe that was part of their demise. But anyway, it's just odd to see them going from when Carmichael and DeCoster were there. They won everything. Dungey was winning on the 250, and Ricky was cleaning house on the 450. It's just my boss, or one of my bosses, there was two guys I was dealing with.
He told me something one time, and I thought, boy, I'm in the wrong camp. I didn't realize that he was giving me inside baseball.
Okay.
Because I didn't think there was any reason for us to chase red motorcycles. And he says, oh, no, costs too much to win championship. We just want to look like a race team. Thought, man, I'm in the wrong place. But then later I realized, well, yeah, it is a for-profit business at the end of the day. And where you're busy paying out millions of dollars of bonus money, you ain't even selling that many of these motorcycles.
Yeah, so that actually makes a lot of sense. I always thought, okay, let's just take a look at Honda. What they're paying Jet and Hunter and the 250 kids and championship bonuses alone. Jet has cleaned house pretty good here as of late. There's no way they sell enough dirt bikes to recoup that cost and get into the black. Is there?
It didn't seem like it to me. They're marking them parts up a lot. They're not selling enough motorcycles.
So I get it. I mean, and frankly, outside of the electric start, I would say is probably it's due for that. That bike's still competitive. Look at Ken Roxon goes out and does great on it, So anyway, I just thought it was it's interesting watching what they're doing, and maybe what you're saying is right. They're going, hey, maybe we're not winning championships, but we still have a competitive brand. We can use it to do image marketing. And
well, Kawasaki proved this years ago when they had Dave Jordan and Bob Brown running the Team Green. They're trying to break in with that little 80 that they had. And so they would fly off to different races, local events across the country, find out who the local kid is that's winning, give them an option to ride a Kawasaki for a good deal. And most of the time they'd take that. Well, what they learned was people aren't buying at the amateur level what Jeff Ward wins on. They buy they get beat by on the weekend. That's a whole other way of looking at this thing, right? And the Team Green thing, I mean, they were going to win just through attrition.
Yeah, they had so many guys. And so those were the guys that started Team Green? You're going way back. Early 80s, late 70s?
Yeah, they were both coming out of the military, so like strategic.
Tactical. I like that. I was curious what your thought was on the switch to 4-strokes. Like, again, just going back, you always seemed like this 2-stroke guru. But I know you did a lot of work with the 4-stroke. You made 4-stroke components and parts. What was that switch like? Were you, I don't know, excited for it? Was it like a cool change, or were you like, miss the old days?
Well, again, going back to my buddy at Suzuki, he says when it comes to racing, simple is better. And the 4-strokes aren't simple.
No. I know. That's the biggest bummer, I think, to me about it is I learned how to rebuild a 2-stroke engine with my dad on an 80, showing me how to change a piston and don't drop the circlip down in the, I can't. He's not showing me how to rebuild a 4-stroke engine or a dad today isn't showing his kid that because he doesn't know. You got to take it somewhere and pay for it.
Well, I was thinking about this, early on when we first got involved with this type of thing, there wasn't any place really to go to get your engine hopped up, let's say, to try to be more competitive. What was really happening, it was dads working in their garage after work, figuring stuff out, and then now somebody wants to pay them to build their kids. That's where these businesses are kind of coming from garage after hours working on stuff. But now, as time got on, the bikes have gotten more and more difficult to make better, and so that kind of separates the men from the boys, right? And so then people are just willing to just pay you to do it. But there's a challenge to that, and I mean I've made a living because of that. And so, like I said, for a guy that can't hardly read, done okay with that motorcycle thing, but don't have to be able to read too good.
Yeah, our sport's always been blue collar and very low point of entry, and it's just not anymore. Even going back to, and I probably overdo this and talk about it too much, viewing the past through rose-colored glasses, but you could show up in a beat-up pickup truck with a bike that was a couple years old, gear that didn't match, and no one really made fun of you. It was like, hey man, glad you're here. And I feel like you do that now, and you got to show up in the Sprinter van, you got to have the latest kit. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a different vibe. And
I was watching a YouTube video a week ago, and it was Daniel Blair and a few other guys that have gone through the amateur stuff and retired at this point, talking about their amateur time compared to what it looks like now. You have to live at a compound. You got to have all this stuff, right? And I look at all that and think, well, they're trying to blame it on it costs too much and this and that. I look at it and go, we got a parent problem. They're way over the top with this stuff. You know, why did you get involved in the first place? To have fun.
Yeah.
And these guys figure out how to take all the fun out of it, thinking the kid's going to get rich one day. Well,
And you know those odds as well as I do. You're better off taking your money to Vegas and putting it all on black. You'd have better odds than of your kid making a living at this.
I'm a little tainted, done it a long time. I tell people, race mini bikes, have a good time, and when it's time to move up, find something else to do. Because that big bike, that thing weighs a lot more. It's like when I got to Anaheim and they got the electric ones out there, right? People are oohing and ahhing, looking at them. I just had one question. How much does it weigh? Oh, well, the guy said it feels like. I said, no. How much does it weigh when it lands on you?
250 pounds is 250 pounds, no matter how it feels. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, anyway, I think you answered my question there. We've got some more of that stuff as we get further in. Hey, be sure to swing over to whiskeythrottlemedia.com if you guys haven't. We got all kinds of moto, off-road stuff, dual sport stuff, new merch, a lot of great content over there, a freestyle feature called Hang Time that has been really fun. And also, if you need some moto coaching, Elevate. Check out elevateactionsports.com. We got some great coaches over there doing awesome stuff. Dean's Story brought to you today by Yamaha. Let's get to it. Tell me where you grew up. Where are you from? Are you right where you still live?
Well, I live 2 houses down.
Okay. I heard a story about this, that you guys kind of bought the whole block or something, or...
You know, it all started off...
Which is where? It's right by LA.
In Norwalk. We're in
okay.
city of Norwalk. And so my dad bought that little house. He had a house payment, a wife, and a car payment, and he was bringing home $75 a week. He said, I had no idea how I'm going to pay for all this. And so he only had one job.
Okay.
And his whole life, walking to school, he looking in the window at that motorcycle shop on the way to school going, man, oh, man. So I think he's about 13 years old. He got hired on as chase a broom or something, rud parts. He had a little scooter or something.
Okay. At this dealership?
At that dealership. And that dealership, it's like nothing I'd ever seen before and still haven't. The owner's name was Louis Thomas, and the guy had to be a genius or something. He had it figured out. And so he had bought, I think he might have had a different location prior, but when I came in onto the scene, he was at a newer place. And they had a dividing wall. One side's all marine, boats and this kind of thing. And the other side's all motorcycle. And they ran the BSA racing team, the flat track stuff, out of that shop.
Okay.
And so they had an underground dyno facility where anybody didn't usually have a dyno. They'd have to come there to do their tuning. So anyway, my dad, as a young man, grew up, and over the course of 25 years, he became, the head of each department. And so this place could actually, they had paint booths because it's street bikes, right? A street bike could get crashed, guy get hurt or whatever. They had all the frame straightening things,
the jigs and all that.
Jimmy Buchanan, my dad taught him how to straighten frames. I mean, that all came from this shop, right? And so everybody knows who Buchanan is, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so they also had the paint booths. They could grind their own cams, make their own pistons. I mean, they could do everything under one roof. They just couldn't chrome parts. That's the only thing they couldn't do. Okay. And so my dad got a really great education. And at the same time, the people that Louis had hired on all the time were always the best guys. I mean, the smartest guys always worked there. So my dad got to mentor under all that.
Jeez. Education there he got.
And so a couple of blocks down the street was a Yamaha dealer, A.J. Lewis, a friend of my dad's. And so my dad bought a couple of 125 Yamaha AT1s in 1969. And they had two models. They had the MX and the Enduro.
Okay.
And so AJ says, I'd recommend the Enduro. He said, that MX thing, that'll hurt you. That thing's too fast, right? Okay. How fast could that have been? But at the time.
125 in the 60s, yeah.
Yeah. And so my dad bought a couple of those. We'd start going up to Phelan, riding around and start bringing friends out. Well, one time, whoever he'd brought up there, they lost the guy. And so we're out looking around for him. And when my dad found him, it was a side swipe with this guy. So he broke a rib, a leg, a toe. And so they ended up having to have a toe amputated. And so there's the time to rehabilitate. So he's at home for a while, not going back to work. But in the meantime, he's already built his garage in the back, and he can do a few things there. And so he starts doing a little repair work at home while he's rehabilitating. And at some point he says, I'm making more money on accident at home than I am working on purpose for that guy.
Oh, really?
So he never went back to work. And so our whole legacy was altered by that crash up in Phelan.
Wow.
Because he didn't have the faith to step out. But this convinced him otherwise. See?
Yeah.
A big deal,
That's crazy. Yeah, I think a lot of people would be better off working on their own, but they just fear the unknown, and you got a family to take care of, and how am I going to pay these bills?
Yeah, there was no safety net. There was no health care provided, none of that stuff anyway.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Crazy. So did he have a name for his business back then?
Yeah, it was just Rudy's Motorcycle Repair.
Okay.
And that's how the name got altered at some point, because I wrote down here a few names, And so I don't remember seeing this happen. My dad just relayed it to me.
Yeah.
That Brock Glover, Dick Glover, my dad said would drive from, San Diego up and have my dad lace wheels up. He says the only guy that could lace the wheels this kid couldn't destroy.
Oh, really?
And so then he told Dick Johnson, so then Dick starts coming up. So we meet Ricky. And that's kind of how things started rolling that way. And so Ricky is like in the 6th grade. And so he made a plaque, just R&D out of wood, right, and gave it to me, right? And he says, you ought to call this thing R&D, Rudy and Dean. So that's about all the thought that went into that.
It's such a cool name, yeah, and the logo and everything. Huh. So Ricky came up with that, or his dad?
No, Ricky did.
Really?
He actually made 2 sides, but the other one, I don't know what happened. He made one called Ida's Place, in the kitchen over there. And so that was hanging in the kitchen for a long time, but I don't know whatever came of it,
Oh, that's
But
funny.
I still have the one he made me.
I didn't know that. RJ named your whole thing, huh?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What was Norwalk like back then? Because it had to be just a different world.
More freedom than we have now.
Yeah.
Now, back in that time, a lot of oil wells over in Santa Fe Springs, which was the sister city or just next door there. And so I had all that area to go ride in. And so it's after we end up with our Suzuki thing, I'm doing all my testing out there. But now it's all built over,
So what were you into as a kid before you got into bikes? Any other sports, any other hobbies? Were you into
I like riding wheelies on my bicycle.
Yeah.
That was my thing. It just didn't take much to keep me interested, just like doing things like that.
Yeah. Into mechanics, working on bikes, working on stuff, or no?
It started off, my dad had a friend, I think his name was Floyd Clymer.
Okay.
And he imported the little 50cc Indians. About the time my brother's going to be 3 years old.
And your brother's, older than you?
Younger.
Oh, he's younger.
He's 6 years younger.
Okay.
And so my dad bought him a little Indian for Christmas or something, right? And so it's got training wheels and all that. And so eventually take the training wheels off, but he ride around in the yard and, And so one day, because my dad's doing all this stuff at home in that garage, he's got machine shop capability at this point, Healy arc welder, he's pretty handy. Mm-hmm. So down the street here in Norwalk is a little mini bike rental. It's called Cycle Town.
Okay. And they rented mini bikes?
They'd rent bikes, yeah. And people tear them up and they need to fix them. Yeah. And so that's where my dad come into, So Ted Morwood, which ended up being the president of the NMA.
Morwood. Oh, okay.
So Lance's dad.
Okay.
So this was Ted's business. And so he's bringing stuff for my dad to repair. And one day he sees my brother riding around and he goes, wow, rides that thing pretty good. He says, we're putting on races. You got to bring him out sometime. And so, okay. So we drive out to Indian Dunes on a Friday night. And so that starts the thing,
What year would that have been?
72.
Okay.
And so he rides around out there in the novice class. He runs around there, gets second behind some little girl. But
of course.
But the way they hook you is the trophy isn't available till next week.
Oh, brilliant.
See, so you have to show up while you're there. You might as well race. And so it starts the ball rolling, see. Pretty genius.
That is very smart.
And so that
a little shady.
Yeah,
very smart.
They got us in. And so then my dad makes a deal with Ted, because my dad's this 4-stroke guy. And so these are 2-strokes. So Ted's been over there working, tuning, got a little race team. He's got him running a little better. And so my dad asks him you keep my kid's bike running. I'll take care of whatever and we'll just trade it out, right? So that goes along for a little while. And then one day we get a call. It's Friday. We're getting ready to go to the races. It's after lunch. Ted calls and says, I don't know what's wrong with the bike. I said, can't get it to run. well, that ain't going to work. I mean, we're already addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad asked my mom and I to go pick the bike up. Well, it just so happened Sandy Rainey, Wayne's dad, was at the house right at that moment. And he's really good with those two strokes. He's got Wayne's bikes running good. And so my dad asked him if he would stay and have a look at this thing, right? So we can make that race. So he did. And so we bring the bike back, and Sandy pulls the carburetor off. He gets a flashlight. He looks around, and he figures out what was wrong, right? They had drilled a couple of little holes in the piston to line up with some extra ports that they had ground in the cylinder, and the drill had walked over.
Oh, okay.
And there's no reed valve. It's just so it's free porting it right out the intake. And so Sandy found that problem. And so they took it apart. My dad heli arced the piston, filed it, moved the hole over, put it together, problem solved, made the race. Right? And so while they had it apart, Sandy's looking at the cylinder going, oh, we could do this a lot better. He says, you know what? Don't take it back over there no more. I'll help you. And so Sandy is my coach. Whole life changed from that day.
Yeah. Serendipity.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you stuff about that. Quite amazing.
Yeah. So how did Wayne Rainey's dad end up over there?
My dad needed a bore cylinder, maybe his Honda cylinder, something for Sandy.
Okay.
And the timing was perfect.
Yeah.
And
so then did he become kind of a coach and mentor to you then?
Yeah, always in.
Now, did you race at all, or were you?
No, I was always on the safe side.
Okay.
But Sandy had taught me something early on, and I thought, never lose sight of that. It was a good principle. He says, never cheat. He says, because once you're willing to go there, you'll lose all your ability to be creative and do it the right way. And it's like, oh, write that down.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You remember Shane Bess?
Oh, yeah.
His dad, Mike, great guy, right? And that was another lesson. Suzuki wanted him to race in the 80 class at Loretta's in the stock and mod, but he's a little too big for the stock suspension. And the rules back then, you had to run factory
everything.
Original.
Yeah.
And so, I'll put some stiffer springs, right? And he goes, oh, no. He says, that wouldn't be legal, right? And he says, and for me to cheat would be like telling my son, I don't think you have what it takes, but I'm going to try to make up the difference. He said, I can't do that to my boy. That's pretty big. And so what we ended up doing is we knew what springs we needed. We just had to get those made at Showa at the factory and get a part number and get them in the warehouse. So that's what we did. And then he could race the thing and be legal then.
You can add fork springs and you could add oil to the forks, right? Wasn't that it?
Well,
if I remember right,
you couldn't change anything. You could maybe change oil, but the springs weren't. It had to be something you could buy from the factory.
Right.
And Suzuki didn't have anything optional at the time, so they had to change that.
Workaround, creative. That's interesting. That's good to hear. I didn't know his dad at all. But
he's a great dude.
Yeah, that sounds like it. It's especially in dirt bike racing or any kind of motorsport, finding a guy with that kind of integrity is kind of tough. You know what I mean?
Shouldn't be,
but there's kind of this unspoken mantra, like if you're not cheating, you're not trying. You've heard that saying, right? Like,
sound like something a cheater would say.
Right. Well, and it's funny because this one of my rivals as a younger amateur kid, mini bikes, we would race pretty hard on the track, and our parents would, there was like weird tension between them. And after one race, they came over, and the mom says, she's giving us a tongue wag, and I know you guys are cheating because we are, and you're beating us. My dad and I just laughed. I mean, we weren't, but that was, I'll never forget that. Okay. So this intersection with Sandy Rainey, Wayne Rainey's father, sort of set you down the path of getting educated and really interested into motor building and mechanics in general.
Yeah, that was the path of success. And so like one thing that Sandy used to do that was also quite eye-opening is whatever the bike that was the one that everybody's winning on, that's not the one Wayne was going to get to race. He had to ride the one that the other guys can't win on. And we're going to figure out how to make that one a winner.
Jeez. Okay.
Well, how'd that work out for his boy?
Yeah, he went on to do okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that mindset is kind of important,
Yeah. I mean, if you can do it on an inferior product, well, it says an awful lot about the person as an engine builder, that rider, everything else. So, interesting.
But just to be able to be there, most people would know that's actually going on that way, but just to be a witness to it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you were, did you know at the time, did you realize, Wayne wasn't really, how successful was Wayne at that point? He hadn't really.
He could win. He was out front even, as long as the bike was running.
Yeah, yeah. Did you realize, though, how fortunate you were?
I don't know if you ever know that at the time.
Yeah.
You see it looking back,
Yeah.
But it's just the people I knew, that's all.
Yeah.
And but it is fortunate to have them.
That's crazy. What was the moto scene like back then? You mentioned going to Indian Dunes on a Friday. I have all these guys come in and tell me stories of, in the 70s and even 80s, you could race 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week.
That's what we were doing.
Was it?
There was no practicing other than right before the race.
Yeah.
And that is the best practice.
Yeah.
A race.
Yeah.
But they've kind of cut that out of everything now. You can't find something like that going on, really.
Yeah. I say that all the time. I feel like this is why our GP counterparts have sort of crept up on us, because that used to be how we were. Practice tracks where it was a dusty, beat up piece of junk in the hills. And so any opportunity you got to go ride a prep track and race, man, you took advantage of it. If it was 5 nights a week, it was 5 nights a week. That's how it still is in Europe. They don't have a lot of prepped practice stuff during the week. It's trash, and you watch videos of your GP favorites. They're riding dusty hard pack or deep sand and ungroomed, right? And then
I'd go out with Brian Myerscough.
Mm-hmm.
There's not too many guys that could ride a motorcycle like him. And his practice tracks, you couldn't even walk around them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just terrible. But, that's how you end up being able to ride like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so go back then. When did R&D actually happen? When did it go from your dad's shop to kind of take us through that transition?
Well, my dad being kind of a craftsman, he's working with my brother,
Mm-hmm.
and at some point we're doing our own stuff. And now he's gonna move up to ride a 60 too, with a little Honda MR50.
Okay.
And so my dad, that's only a 3-speed gearbox in that bike, right? And so first gear is super low. It just barely will.
Sure.
And then the big jump to second. So really you're dealing with a 2-speed gearbox. First is pretty worthless. And so my dad had, new first gear made that was much higher and then closer jump to second. So you had a reusable 3-speed gearbox.
Okay.
And then put a reed valve on the piston port engine. And anyway, when it's all done, it's, he's, painted all flat black, polish all the fin edges. It just looks like a work of art when it's all done,
Yeah.
And so my brother's got that mounted and the frame's all chromoly tubing, nickel plated, no stock stuff, right? It's all custom painted. So the thing's a little beauty. And then a spare engine on an engine stand sitting there at the back of the van, so people see all that. It's like, one guy says, I'll give you $1,000 for that motor. That's a lot of money back then, right?
Yeah.
So it's sold, right? But ultimately what they're seeing happen is they can't have this stuff. It's not for sale. And that makes them want it.
Sure.
And so that's how it started.
Okay. So how far did your brother go with racing? Did he go on to race professionally?
He got into the pro ranks
Okay.
for a little while. And so that last year, they had the Transcal series. So it's like 7 rounds.
Okay.
And he's riding in the intermediate class at the time. And so he won all 14 motos. And at the last race was a double pointer, and there's some guy in the vet class that, if that guy wins and because of the double points, and my brother doesn't win that last moto, that guy could win this motorcycle that they got up for the winner.
Yeah.
And so my brother ended up having to win all 14 motos. Well, those were on Saturday. Well, on Sunday is the pro. So that's his first day on the pro at Saddleback. And it's a full gate. You got factory.
Oh,
yeah.
What year would this have been?
Probably
Ish.
84.
Okay.
Something like that. Anyway, so on that start line goes down. You got Johnny and Jeff Ward. Everybody you can think of is on that line with all their good stuff, right? He pulls the start, right? So he's leading that whole crowd. And then Jeff Ward dogging on him, right? Finally gets around him. And as soon as they go up a big hill, just drive right back around.
Oh,
him.
really?
So they must have passed him 3 times up that hill before he made it stick. But it looked good,
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, one of them days at Saddleback, he fell down, knocked himself out, and, the crowd almost made it around to him before he woke back up. Right? And he crawled over to the side with a broken collarbone, and my dad got down to him. He looked at my dad and says, "No more."
Oh, really?
No more.
Called it right there.
Yeah, that's enough.
Smart.
I was telling my wife on the way here, sometimes you got to know when's the time to say no more.
Yeah.
And not everybody knows when that is.
No, I think we have an epidemic of that in this sport, sadly, just because it's so fun and addicting, and
I'm sure we can make money with a halfway house for ex-motorcycle racers.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Well, we're always taught, never give up, right? Never quit. So just this mindset that's beat into you as a racer, it's very counterintuitive to go, you know what? Just thinking about this logically, I think I'm going to quit. It's just, you don't want to go that route, right? But
I was at Steel City. It must have been 90. And so George Holland he got the #1 plate. He's on that Honda. And they've had a couple weeks off, and he's been staying at Stanton's house or something, training there. Man, he shows up there, and he is eating their lunch out there in that first moto. And, man, he goes down, right? And he didn't just jump right back up, and that's not like him. And it's like, ooh, that dinged him, huh? And so I don't even know if he finished that moto, but so I went over to the Honda pit afterwards and had a little talk with him, They've already got their Allman thing going on. I mean, they're doing well. You don't need these motorcycle races, right? So I told him, what are you thinking? You want to end up in a wheelchair? I said, you don't need all this no more, dude. And he looked at me and says, you're right, right? He's never raced another motorcycle.
Is that right? From that day?
Mm-hmm. And so all these years later, I talking to him, and I says, I'll bet we can take everybody we ever knew that won money in racing motorcycles and add it all together, and you could probably buy and sell the whole group. He goes, probably.
He's done well with that, huh? Yeah.
He says, I used to think the racing motorcycles, if I quit, he says, I'd be making peanuts. He goes, come to find out that was the peanuts.
Different nut, but
yeah.
A lot of money in it. Yeah. So, yeah, George Holland, did he win a title?
He won for Honda.
Okay. Yeah.
But see, I was there the day at Carlsbad. I mean, it was, you had Hannah and Brock and all these top guys there, and George could run with those guys or beat them.
Yeah.
But that day, he's got a Works 250, and the engineers are still learning. And so you're the guinea pig, and they're clicking around on that shock, right? Well, man, he went down and took that shoulder out, and he fought with that shoulder his whole career from that one crash.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. There's just the wrong angle.
Well, that's what I was trying to do, because at some point, I was doing all that suspension, right? And the motors.
Oh, were you? Okay.
And I would say I'm better at suspension than the motor. But when I started making those throttle bodies, and do you want to get the liability insurance, they said, well, you'll have to stop doing suspension. I go, oh, okay. So
why?
I didn't ask questions. They just says no more of that. And so, interesting thing.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to tell you is the riders, as I'm working with them, I want them to be, they're not always going to have me with them. So I'm trying to educate them on what this stuff's doing, what more compression or whatever. Yeah. What does that feel like? And so you have some knowledge. So when you go and they hire some young guy to be your mechanic, he don't know either. Yeah. You get clicking around and it gets you hurt.
Well, especially mechanics today, not to poop on them, but each race team has a suspension guy. They have an engine guy that builds the motors. Dunlop changes the tires. They've taken a lot off the mechanic's plate. And so back in the day, the mechanic had to do everything himself. So he was very well versed, right? He could probably, a lot of them in the 80s knew a little bit about tuning the suspension and what everything did, right? But I think it's probably gotten to be less and less. And there's not enough of what you did, educating the rider on, hey, let's go out and teach you what these clickers do. Let's teach you why.
Well, I was really fortunate because of my dad and the people that he knew, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was a guy, he owned a company called S&W Shock Absorbers. It's Tim Witham. It was Sparks and Witham. And my dad's friend Pete Smiley owned an industrial complex. And that when S&W first went into business, they were in one of Pete's buildings. Again, another friend of my dad. And they hired this young engineer. Back at that time, I'm a little kid, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember him saying, they $50,000, it's a lot of money back then, right? This guy to come hired on. The guy's name was Bruce Burness. You don't know if you never ever heard of him.
I don't think I have.
But he would be the guy that was helping Honda back when Honda was winning all that stuff, with the suspension getting better, cartridge, this and that. Well, Bruce is the brains behind this stuff, right? I got a picture somewhere where it's a work Suzuki with that Reby forks. Remember the leading? And it's got the Reby guy, Rogers the rider, and Bruce Burness all in the picture right there. It's like that guy right there, man. Something special. And so I always had his number. And so when I start visualizing things, what I think's going on inside of a shock absorber, I don't have to go make every mistake to find my way. I could just call Bruce and say, Bruce, this is what I'm thinking. Am I on the right track? And I remember one time he told me, he says, well, there's 3 people in the world that understand that now. Me, Kawasaki, and you. Who has that? Guy to call.
Yeah, that's a lifeline right there. That's awesome.
So a lot of times it's who you know makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for sure, right? I mean, if you can be the dumbest guy in the room all the time.
That's the place to be.
That's the place to be. Yeah, but a guy in your position, that's tough. You know, you learned a lot early on.
Well, I drove to Kernut. You know, Charlie Kernut used to make the shocks, right? I drove out to his place, and it's like, wow, you have to get a passport to go out there. It's a long drive.
Where is he?
29 Palms or something.
Oh, jeez.
Right?
Yeah.
Seemed like a long way.
It's a long way.
And I thought, just because I can't figure this out for myself, I said, no more of those trips. I got to learn how to make this go, because I ain't driving all the way to get this guy to do it for me.
Yeah.
You know?
That's most of the way to Phoenix from where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so what year then did you guys form R&D-ish? Do you know?
Probably 75.
75. Okay.
75, 76, right in there.
Okay. And then what was most of your business early on? You guys were going to the races.
This is a good question.
Yeah.
Because I wonder the same thing. It's like, how's my dad making a living? We're gone all the time, 5 days a week. How's he doing this? But I guess it's from the boring the cylinders, and because he had that cylinder reboring service.
Okay.
And so he did a lot of that, because what he was doing was my mom would do the pickup and delivery to the local dealers.
Okay, so the dealers were sending him stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Was it just motorcycle stuff and particularly motocross stuff at the time?
No, it wasn't. It was street bikes.
Mostly street bikes. Okay. I was going to say, was he doing like lawnmowers, like any kind of 2-stroke engine work?
No.
Okay.
No,
it was motorcycles. Okay.
What he would do early on, the same thing I was telling you, a guy could crash a bike and tear it up. Say the guy got killed on the thing. That bike, my dad would turn that thing into a custom street bike. I mean, beautiful work, you know, and turn around and sell it for a profit. And so when I'm a little kid, I'm going down to the bank with my dad, and he's paying payments on that house, right? Double, triple, you know, paying that thing off. And so
which he probably bought for what, 40 grand?
No, 78.50. Right?
Can you
and
imagine?
So he told me I had no idea I was going to pay for that, right? But him and my mom were the first people to make it into the local newspaper to have their home paid for.
Is that right?
And so I thought, you know, years later, I said, well, you know, he didn't have anybody modeling this stuff for him. He figured this out on his own. I said, how'd you do that? And it was like a really simple idea. He says, well, I used to buy everything I saw, and I never had any money, so I just did the opposite. So he applied that principle, and next thing you know, you get out of debt. And so, yeah. And so I was fortunate to have a set of parents that were modeling that, you know.
That's great.
So when I worked for Suzuki, you know, by the time, you know, my parents, I'm living at home. We got a business. We're all working together for the same purpose, right? And so they didn't give me free reign over my money. You know, when Suzuki started paying, you know, they kind of kept tabs of that stuff, right?
Were you still pretty young at that point?
Well, I mean, I worked, and by the time I was 30 years old, there was enough money saved up to pay that house off and not have a mortgage. Wouldn't have been if I was had a free reign with it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And so, I mean, it seemed like a bad idea at the time. I look back going, man, they saved me a fortune. Just like tough love, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, did you kick and scream at the time, or were you like...
I'm more of a compliant son.
Yeah.
I find you do better in life that way.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, so from 75 on, he's, you know, are you selling at this point? You know, you're going to the races, he's got the bike on the stand, your brother's racing this really trick bike.
We're porting cylinders and little odds and ends like that.
But it wasn't really, was it picking up steam with the local racing scene? Because if your brother's pulling and passing Wardy up hills at Saddleback.
Oh, well, yeah, we were busy by then, you know, because that's years into
that's
this at
84,
that point. Because we start off in the 70s, see?
Yeah.
But, yeah, there was just enough to keep us going all the time somehow. You know?
So how did you guys get involved with Suzuki? What time period was that?
Okay. Yeah, so this would have been 77 is when we first hooked up. So it might have been earlier. I don't know if it's into 76, but somewhere in that time frame. Okay. Because Suzuki was making an RM80.
Okay.
Right? And so they had a couple of boys riding them, testing. So it was Welchel and Schmidt. Okay. And so we just happened to go out to Indian Dunes on a Sunday, and I had Ricky Johnson and a kid named Brian Ananachi, both from El Cajon, go down there. We were running Yamahas. And, I mean, the gate drops, these guys are gone, you know. And so the Japanese from Suzuki followed me back to the pit, you know, and introduced themselves, exchanged business cards, you know. And so, you know, smart aleck kid, you know. They're impressed with the bikes and go, oh, we didn't even bring the good ones. We left those at home, you know. Yeah. And so they called a few weeks later and invited us out to Saddleback, you know, bring the boys. They want them to ride the bikes and stuff. And so that all went pretty smoothly. And then they says, you know, we don't conduct business at the racetrack. If you would come back, you know, to Suzuki off the 5 freeway, they had that pagoda. Remember the old building? Yeah. Go back there.
They had Rick and this kid ride the Suzukis?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they invited us back and offered us, you know, something completely unheard of at the time. 2 free motorcycles and parts. It's like, wow, does it get any better?
Really? So that was that at the time, no one was doing that.
Jeff Ward couldn't get a spark plug out of Honda. No support. So people don't realize there was nothing like that going on.
His dad was doing Jeff Ward Racing, right? And kind of the similar thing to keep Jeff going, right? Building his own stuff. And like you said, it was a lot of the dads figuring it out.
But we did get somebody prior to that. It was a place called Martech, and they made an ignition box where you could take the points and things out of your ignition and convert it over to like a CDI. Okay. And that was just a lot better. And I sold a pile of those things. Okay. And the guy was so happy that owned that company that he bought us a Yamaha for Ricky Johnson to ride, you know. It's like I'd never heard anybody get a free motorcycle before. But I did sell a lot of those ignition boxes.
What would a bike have been back then? A new 80?
Ooh. What, they'd be $600 or $800 maybe?
Yeah. I know it's all relative with inflation and stuff, but
here's a thought for you. I was thinking about this one because there was early on with my association with Suzuki, I remember maybe 79 or 80. Well, I'd spent $250,000, you know, that they paid for it all, right? And they said, oh, don't worry about that. We'll get a bigger budget next year. Well, you calculate that out. That's like $1.4 million now in today's money. Pretty good budget for a few mini bikes running around. Yeah. But Suzuki was just, they didn't care, whatever I wanted.
Well, you're doing their R&D for them, saving that, you know, they were going to spend it one way or the other, right? And you were doing a good job. So, okay, so you get the deal with Suzuki. They give you 2 bikes.
Well, you know, they did the same thing for DG and FMF. So everybody got the same deal.
Okay.
And they let everybody run around and see how well they would do with that, right? Okay. And so over the course of maybe 3 years had gone by, they kind of eliminated the other ones and just brought us more in-house.
So was Rick winning on that thing then?
No, actually, Rick didn't stay around too long.
Okay.
I was sharing this with him the other day as a terrible thing, but figured he needed to know, you know. And so there was a point in time, his dad was a painter, you know, would paint things. But he painted a really cool helmet for Ricky, you know. And I thought, wow, I'd like to get my brother a helmet painted like that, you know. And he told me no.
Dick Johnson
he told me he wouldn't do it, right? And here I am, a knucklehead kid, right? And I go, wow, yeah, well then I guess you don't get to ride these Suzukis. You know, I didn't tell him that, but that just made the thing scarce, you know. And it's like, you know, terrible.
Why did he say he wouldn't do it?
I don't know why he wouldn't do it, but he refused to do it. And I thought, wow, you know, I do a lot of stuff for you guys. You couldn't get a free helmet. So anyway, it was a wrong motive. But, you know, I thought Ricky should know that. You know, it's a stupid thing. You know? And one other thing really bad happened that I said, I'll never do that again. Ricky was looking to move on in the pro ranks. Maybe the Yamahas were not that good at the time, whatever.
Are we on mini bikes or
big bikes?
Big bikes, okay.
I got him lined up to come and race the Works Suzukis for free. And once he came there to sign the deal, they denied him. And he had to go back and beg that Yamaha ride back. I thought, I'll never do that again.
Well, that wasn't your fault, though.
Oh, I'm saying, but I look bad because of that.
Yeah.
Really bad. And it's like, wow, that's.
And why'd they tell him no?
I don't know what the reason was. I just know I won't get involved no more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we've all had those kind of experiences. You interject yourself trying to be helpful and end up looking like a jerk. Okay, so take me kind of from that point then. Once Rick's gone off the mini bikes, who did you guys bring in?
Okay, so we had Brian Antonacci.
And I've never heard that name, but he
was a good little rider.
Okay.
But kind of a little quirky. And one day we're at, I don't know if it was a World Mini, but it was in Vegas somewhere out there. Might have been a qualifier. I don't know. But he had an idea. They had watered the track down. First turn's kind of muddy. So he's going to let everybody go and take off last. And I thought, well, that didn't work out so well. Mm-hmm. I thought, I need to find somebody else, And so Scotty Burnworth was there. And you see, I'm about the same age they are, right? I'm not that much older at the time. And so they can relate to me. And so I asked Scotty if he'd want to ride the Suzukis. Because at that time, his dad's doing all his Yamahas. And so, Bernie wasn't completely convinced this was the idea. That's his dad, the good idea. But Scotty wanted to do it. And so we go down to Verona and bring the bikes down. Scotty falls down the first turn, levers are up, visor's gone. He gets up last, and he, goes off and wins that race, right? His dad, he was doubting this whole thing, right, until then. He come back and he says, 7 seconds a lap faster than he's ever been around this track.
Jeez.
So he never questioned it anymore.
So what year would this have been? Give me a ballpark again. Late 70s?
77.
Okay. In the mini bike landscape, and this is one thing I want to talk about. We're going to talk a lot about mini bikes because in the kind of from that window through the 80s, mini bike racing was huge. There was magazines dedicated to just mini bikes. Mm-hmm. I have to go back and look, but High Torque had like Mini Cross Action or something. It was just mini bikes. And the guys who were really, really high level, they were like superstars back then. The Budmans and Button when he came up. And
I think what you're talking about predates them.
Yes, it does. I'm missing some of the names from those guys back then. Healy, who's earlier than that? Bruce Bunch, Rick Hemme.
Yeah, got a whole stack of them there.
Yeah, I guess it's before my time, so you'd have to kind of let me know who were the really fast guys. But Scott Brown, and it even goes older than that. Anyway, so all that to say, in the mini bike world back then, which bikes was there one brand that was better than the other?
Well, Suzuki was pretty darn good there for a long time. It was always Yamaha. You're coming in, competing, and then the Kawasaki finally made a decent bike, and so then you got three, and then Honda threw its hat in the ring at some point,
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know the timeline of all that. So Suzuki was in on the mini bikes a little earlier maybe, and Yamaha, and then the others sort of trickled in.
Yamaha was there, and I think Suzuki might have came in second because we had that Yamaha first. That was Ricky was riding that, and then the Suzuki wasn't too far behind. And they seemed like the first year they had a 5-speed. The following year was a 6-speed. That they were like, that's pretty quick change around there in 1 year. Keep updating stuff. But what was really impressive for me was to be able to work with the Japanese engineers when there's those times come when there's going to be testing new equipment, future production stuff. And there was a time where what somebody would be like the manager of all the RM development, right? And then these guys fly in, to get to meet them, go to dinner with them, spend a couple of weeks. Well, when that guy gives you his home number and his desk number, you're on the end now.
Yeah, you're on the inside.
When I need something special.
Now, were these, so this wasn't like Tosh and Hide and the guys here. Are you talking about?
This is actual factory in Japan.
Okay.
To have that number, but it's all politics, because once these guys on this side find out you have that kind of contact over their head, lose the number.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's like, aren't we all working for the same? Oh, no, it's all politics. And so, it was a great relationship, but they wouldn't let it keep going.
Everybody squeezes the puppy too tight, right? They don't want to give up any of their leverage. That's interesting. So how was that interaction with the Japanese early on? This is you're talking about really early in development as far as between Japanese and American, counterparts. Even Honda didn't really get going until the 80s with their race team, professional race team, right? That's when they really poured a bunch of money into it. 81, right?
Hey, they were helping me when they were doing that because, I'm not too smart, right? And so I go over there and their stuff's getting better. So I'm standing back watching. Where are they focusing their efforts? And when I see where they're focusing, I go, that must be where I need to be looking. Mm. And so that helped me along.
Did it?
Yeah.
What were you seeing? Like, what was their focus?
Intake. A lot of things going on with intake. Track lengths, carburetor sizes, reed valve sizes, really important. Mm. And so like the 80 that Suzuki sells now, okay, that thing showed up here for testing. And it was already a die-cast cases. I mean, it was already production when it showed up here. And it had a huge reed in there, like a 125 reed. It was way too big, and the thing was anemic. No velocity, And so, it didn't take too long to exhaust the stuff they'd brought over to test, and this thing won't get out of its own way. And so I'd go back at night and start cutting and hacking and changing. And I took a Honda 80 reed and chopped it all down and fit it inside of that 125 reed and, putted it all up, go back out. All of a sudden the thing's running, and so just a few little changes to what they had. They took it back. And here's the thing that made the biggest difference too, is gave them something that they could copy. And they went back and changed the cases and went back to a whole nother set of die castings to hold that smaller reed. And I go, wow, that's a big thing. They changed all that. And so I retained one of them engines here that I knew ran good. And they sent 2 pre-production bikes back before they ran the assembly line. And I found a couple places they had missed it, right? Give them the data of what they needed to fix, right? They made those changes before they ran the assembly line. And, oh, man, that's a solid bike now. But that last check.
And that doesn't always happen, even today. They'll miss stuff. You tell them, hey, make this change, and it doesn't happen, A lot of test riders will say, yeah, we knew this was a problem. We told them about it, and it's still a problem.
Back when I'm like 19, whatever, back at the time, Tosh calls me up and says, hey, they're holding the assembly line in Japan. What rims do you think needs to be on that bike? And no, the ones that are on it are fine. Okay, then we'll let the assembly line go. It's like, well, some knucklehead over here, it's crazy.
19-year-old kid dictating a whole assembly
asking me what I think.
That's cool. Yeah, that means they really valued your opinion. Okay, so next step, as you get into late 70s, who are the big guys at this time? I'm trying to think back, because like my knowledge starts kind of early 80s. Eddie Hicks, Mouse McCoy, kind of those guys. But you're predating them, and so I don't know those late 70s guys that were.
Well, it started off, we would have had Scotty, and then Scotty won everything for us. We had him for 2 years, 77, 78. Okay. Cleaned up Ponca City. We had an amazing run. That first Ponca City, I think out of 16 possible, we won like 12 championships or something. It was amazing, And then after him, we got George Holland. Okay. And then that's when we had Ricky Hemme, and then brought on Bruce Bunch, and then the Kyle Fleming, and Larry Brooks, So that year when the boys all got killed at that train.
Which was what, 80?
82.
82, okay.
I think it was August 1st, 82. And so so we got 3 classes, right? Stock, mod, Superman. And I've got 3 riders. So I'm single-handedly maintaining 9 motorcycles.
It's a lot of work. You didn't have anyone?
No. Just I'm doing all by myself.
Dad, what was Dad doing? He wasn't coming?
He's negotiating, talking to people. He's got the personality at this point, right? He's older, and everybody loved Dad, so yeah.
Okay.
I'm just over there.
The mad tuner.
No time to talk, man. Just all work.
Okay.
But it was a good time. I don't know if I could pull that off anymore.
You were killing it. And I mean, you maintained that for a while. Because like I said, we'll talk about, I'll interject how when you guys I got my first glimpse of you, but when we get to that point, but I mean, you had already been going for a while now, like you said, crushing it. when did the Team Green thing really start to happen? Because by the time I got in there in the 80s, the Team Green tent was massive.
I'm thinking 81,
Big
82.
inflatable thumb, and like you just saw it and I was like, wow.
And to me, it was a freaking joke.
Was it?
Because they have all these kids, all these bikes, and when they're done at Ponca, now they're going to run over to Loretta, right? They would just push them all in the trailer, throw them up against each other, not even tie them down, just like
really?
junk, and just take it to the next thing. It's like, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I don't think they were. You took sort of a smaller number of guys, even though it was 9 motorcycles for 3 guys, but smaller number of guys and made sure they had really good equipment. Team Green was like, hey, we'll give everybody a discount on bikes and parts. Here's $500 worth of parts. Come be a part of this big race team. But each guy wasn't really taken care of in terms of, hey, I can't get my bike running right, or I'm having this problem. You were kind of on your own. That's what it seemed like to me.
That ain't the way I want to do anything, right? I like doing the more refined, smaller controlled, It's like a factory where, this is the place you want to ride for. Yeah. If you had a choice, you want to go over there.
Yeah. You were the factory Honda from like the 80s on mini bikes in the 70s and early 80s, right? That's how it looked like you were a factory team. You were. Essentially, yeah.
Well, my riders were going to be the ones that'll be riding the next wave of works Suzukis, right? That was like a farm team on top of it all.
So was Suzuki good about taking those guys as they'd come up and put them on the factory? Yeah. Okay. Tell me about that summer of '82 when those guys passed. Was that tough for you?
I didn't know how to relate to that actually, And I was talking to my brother this morning when I was walking, and he mentioned about the fact that when that happened, that really shook us. And so we came home from there, and after the funerals and everything, we went out and bought a jet ski. Just to go do something different, have some fun, right? And that worked out pretty good because that turned into like the biggest jet ski company from my brother and Bill Chapin turned that into they were like the #1 jet ski manufacturing, hop up performance.
Oh, really?
Product stuff.
Called what? R&D?
R&D products.
Huh. Okay. I didn't know that was the same thing. I guess I thought it was a different.
It is a different thing. It's a spinoff.
Okay. Interesting.
And you know how that happened? Pretty funny. So my brother's, he's like all buddied up with Brock Glover, and Brock, he's freaking got money. My brother, he didn't have nothing. And, but he's got the champagne taste, Yeah. And so my dad and I are always like digging on him when he's there working with us, right? So finally he's like had enough of us, right? So he goes over and gets a job at the jet ski place, right? The PJS, which like they were winning everything at the time. And so he goes over there, gets a job, and then Chapin, he's over there helping me. And they've all got jet skis and this and that now. So Glenn gets Bill to go over there and get a job at that place, right? Well, then now Glenn's going to school, so he's not there all the time. And so Bill's worked up seniority over him. So he gets mad at my brother and fires him.
Oh, no.
And so, okay, now we got a rivalry going, right? Well, then it didn't take too long before Bill got sideways with Ed Miller, the owner of the PJS. And so he comes to me and said, man, I got a problem. Yes, I said, let him move in, rent a room there and get him, my brother, to, bury the hatchet.
Okay.
And then because of the ability to forgive, turned into the major competition for the other guy.
Good.
And so.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. In the moto side of it, it seemed like everybody, and if I'm missing someone or don't have this right, correct me, but it was like if you rode a Suzuki, it was R&D. If you rode a Cowie, it was probably Dave Miller, like DMC, or Barr's competition, Rodney Barr. I think he did a lot of the East Coast guys.
Bobby Barr.
Maybe Pro Circuit was doing some of the Hondas for like Button and Scott Brown and those guys. But each manufacturer had a camp, it seemed like. Was that how it was?
It seemed like it was. That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, I remember there was a time, they'll build a bike for a certain amount of time before they get the next generation of it. And there are times when you're under the gun, let's say. Somebody else has got a little better equipment. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a little concerned now because we got better riders, but our equipment's, we're having a harder time. And so I tell Tosh, we can't lose our guys, And so we get Buddy and Jimmy Gaddis a contract. So they get a 2-year contract, $30,000, and then all expenses paid and everything. It's like nobody else had ever got that before.
For mini bikes.
For the mini bikes, you see. And so, but then that able to retain our guys.
Yeah.
And then we went to work and developed that engine, and I got that thing to run way better. You know, and
Mm.
so now they weren't suffering from equipment problems anymore, but all at the same time making a few bucks. You know, so
Yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah, making that kind of money back then on an 80, that's a pretty big deal.
Well, did Buddy ever tell you he went to Disneyland? You hear about that?
No, I didn't hear about this.
Well, I don't know what the number is, but like, let's say that, 10 millionth person or whatever it was that walks through the gate, all the bells and whistles go off. Well, guess who that was?
Buddy?
Buddy. He won a car.
Come on.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No.
I never
Said
heard
you
this.
used all your luck up already, man.
Oh, jeez. I have to ask him about that. I texted him earlier to ask if he had any fun R&D stories because he's, in terms of mini bike guys, he and Gaddis are the two guys I think of probably most when I think of R&D. And he was in the middle of the school, so he didn't get back to me. But
Now, I got a Gaddis story. It's kind of silly because I kind of consider them, hillbillies a little bit, And so I look over on the starting line, and I see this Gaddis's brother beating on the handlebar with a big old stick, and I thought, what in the world are you doing? He goes, the handlebars don't feel right. I go, it's because they're straight. You're used to riding around on bent ones all week long.
Donnie, was it Donnie?
Yeah.
His family was wild. Don Gaddis, Jimmy's dad, and his brother, they would fight anybody, anytime, anywhere. Almost seemed like they were looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy was the sweetest, nicest, most easygoing kid. It was so funny to me. And then even Budman, but his dad was a character. You dealt with a lot of different personalities, huh?
Well, sometimes, and this is another, I'd get fed up with them once in a while, right, these parents. And I'd go cry at Toshi a little bit, my boss over there. And so he told me some stuff, and I go, man, I can't, I'm not wired like that, But he'd say something like, you're holding all the cards, right? He'd say, use them up and then drop them like a dead fly. Go, man, that's how they see this stuff, right? I go, that ain't how I don't go through life like that,
Tosh said that, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Cutthroat.
It's rough out there.
Apparently it is rough out there.
But, in my case, for the longest time, I felt like I was the guy that could do no wrong in his eyes. So I remember one time, crazy, there's secretaries that work down there, right? Well, I'm young and I'm dating these girls once in a while, take them to dinner. Ain't nothing going on, right? And but it doesn't matter. They can make stuff up, right? And oh my God, heads were rolling over there, but not me.
They protected you, huh?
And it's like I'm supposed to be the bad guy here, and yet everybody else is in trouble but me.
Oh boy. Were you so? There was a point you started building engines for the factory big bike team too, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen? Because I remember you telling me a story maybe about Washougal or something. And
Well, before that.
okay.
So again, back to Meyer Scuff. So Brian's got a factory ride, and he's partnered up with Mark Barnett.
Okay.
And so Chris Haynes is doing Brian's bike, and then Jeff Clark, who we just lost here a couple months ago, is taking care of Barney. And so Chris, he would bring over Brian's bike and just leave the bike and the parts, and I'd take it out in the field, and I would try stuff because they'd have cylinders and pipes and ignitions, but I don't know they had the ability to sort through it all to come up with what would be the right combination or what I thought was, and so they would just let me have at it, right? And so I would change and take the sleeve out of the previous year, put it in the newer one. Change the porting around, figure out what pipe, what ignition. And then when I liked it, for whatever reason, not much of a rider, but I have a feel.
Yeah.
And the riders like the same thing I like. And so Brian had this bike. Well, then Brian got sick, and he couldn't continue the series. And so Chris is out here with that bike, and the race is going to take place the last 2 rounds or something, back east, on the East Coast, way over there. And so Chris Haynes tells Mark Blackwell, the team manager at the time, they didn't know about what was going on behind the scenes here, right? That this engine's been tuned up. Because you can't get permission, right?
Right.
And so once they're in contention to win a championship now, first 125 for Suzuki. With Barney.
Yep.
He's chasing Brock. And so Chris tells Mark about this motor. He says, I think if he has this thing, he could win that championship. Well, then you need to get that thing back there. So this is a Wednesday. He drove all the way across the country to get it there for Saturday practice.
Oh, geez.
And he rides the bike around and says, okay, put that motor in my frame. And so he went out and won both those motos. And then they went to Cocoa Beach the next. And then, so now the Japanese know. And so they want to retest the other motor in those conditions at Cocoa Beach compared to this motor I did. And like they told me, like 10 minutes into testing, the ignition went out on his engine. I go, oh, well, that could have been the first moto the week before. You know?
Jeez.
And so he goes on and wins both motos and wins their first championship.
Okay.
And that was just a motor that was actually meant for Brian.
Yeah. Huh.
And so somewhere there was a picture.
So how did they react to finding out you had been doing this?
They didn't say nothing.
Okay.
But they never reported it to Japan. They never knew about none of that.
I wonder if it had gone not well, like if he hadn't won the title, if you'd have been maybe
I don't know.
browbeaten a little bit forward.
You never know. But they got to be happy right now.
You can't say much when they just won, yeah.
But what was I going to tell you?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
So did they continue to have you, did they bring you into the fold a little more after that?
Off and on, you know. And so usually when they're way behind, and then all of a sudden they need some help, you know. Like the engine that Guy Cooper ended up using in 91. Well, I had that engine, I told them the year before. I mean, I got a really good 125, right? Well, they didn't seem to care. But when they were finally like 60 points behind Kudrowski, halfway through the season, they, did you say you had a motor?
Looking for something.
Yeah. And so I went to the Washougal, and I didn't bring the motor yet. I just brought different intake tracks, different carburetors, stuff that I'd been working on. Because the stuff they were running, I knew that wasn't any good. But they kept using it, you know. And so, was her name Jenna? Was Cooper's wife, something like that? She's, you know, does lap times. I think it was on a Thursday. She'd do lap times. He'd go out there and ride the engine that he was supposed to race and get his lap times, and then come back, and I changed. I think I left the reed valve that they actually had in there, but I had an insert that reed went in, and it used up a lot of crankcase volume, you know, tightened things up. And he went out there and made a bunch of laps, and, you know, it was like 6 seconds a lap better with that change. I mean, that seems like big, 6 seconds, right? Said, okay, let's get rid of all that stuff, and let's run this reed valve and this carburetor, right? Knocked another 6 seconds. So these guys are 12 seconds a lap faster now.
What?
And they were going
12 seconds a lap?
And they were trying to go race that combination. How are you going to do that? You know?
That's crazy. So then Coop was like, I have to have this?
Yeah. Well, he raced that one. Then I brought one extra carburetor and let Larry Ward. And these guys ran right up in the front, you know. And so then now there's like a 2-week break or something before the next race. And so I take that combination that they're using and actually compare it to my motor. It's like there ain't no comparison still, right? So now we're going to start taking my motor. And so I had a box, and I would fly to the race with the box. And I'd be on the airplane with all the Kawasaki guys are on the plane with me. We're sitting around there waiting for the flight, you know, and I've got the engine that they're going to be competing. And I take it back and forth every week. Right?
Okay. So you wouldn't let Suzuki get into it? Like, did you want to keep?
No, they wanted me to maintain it.
Okay.
You know? But, I mean, it knocked it back like 30 points, you know, from a 60-point deficit.
He won 1990, right? And then.
Yeah, he won because Bale fell and broke his arm.
That's right. Kudrowski almost caught him, right? I remember Mike telling this story.
But see, if you watch, I don't believe that Mike's bike was ever as competitive as the one Bale had until Bale was gone.
That's what he said. He told that
story. You
story.
could hear the difference.
Yeah, when he was on the show, he alluded to that. Maybe it was Washougal that Bale got hurt, and so there was 2 or 3 rounds left, and he started clicking off wins on Bale's bike after that, but it just came up a little short. It's like, man, if you'd have put me on the good bike all year.
But this is the politics thing.
Yeah. It's been that way forever, huh?
Well, when I was helping at the end there, I was helping Larry. Big Bird, right?
Yeah.
And so, but he's really at that point a B-level support rider, right? Well, they don't want the B-level riders beating their A riders. So now you're a problem.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to say, why are we paying these guys all that money when this other guy that don't cost us hardly anything is winning? So there's all that going on all the time, you know?
Was that when he was on Suzuki or Honda?
Suzuki,
okay. Interesting. Okay. So that was when you kind of started working with them. They just bring you in and out.
Yeah, because I'm focused on my mini bikes, right?
Yeah.
This other stuff we're doing on the side.
Yeah. Was there ever any talk of coming over there full time to do development? It seems like a no-brainer.
I think I did the last year. I was there pretty much working with them. And that's what got me out of there, I think, is because big mouth, right? It's meeting time, right, for negotiations. Well, I looked at the record here for the whole year, and I go, the only races you guys won are the ones I was at. So I don't know if I'm a good luck charm or what it is, but it looks like you guys can't even jet a carburetor. And you know what they told me? But we don't need you. And so I go, so that's why that goes. See, humble approach is much better than getting cocky. But at the same time, I thought if I'm not ever going to get a raise, this would be the year. And they said, you're out of here.
Instead of a raise, we're going to let you go.
So what happened then is I got married. So now I got a wife, got a kid, and I don't have a job. Not a great combination.
Well, so then what did you do? Just
kept focusing on working in the garage there and doing jobs,
So tell me a little bit about, let's bump up into the 80s, 1980s. Tell me about the guys you were working with there. And like I said, I come in about 85. That's when I first saw you. And this is, to kind of bring me up to 84, let's say. 80 to 84.
Well,
who
we lost the boys, and so that was
Yeah.
a big hit. Because for whatever reason, the kids that were riding for the Yamaha guys, you'd think they'd maybe want to come in, but no, they want to beat us. And that we're really vulnerable now because we don't have our riders anymore, right? And but we did have Mike Healy. So Mike had won Ponca City, must have been like 83 or something on a Honda. So he came over and brought the #1 plate.
Okay.
So we had a good time there, and then he did something that was truly amazing. Is the last race at Ponca is the Super Mini.
Okay.
And so I decided not to watch the start. I got way back over in the back over there, and I'll just watch them come through and just kind of watch the back area. Well, I hear all these bikes coming, and I watch them all go by, but I never saw Mikey. It's like, did I miss him? And then after those guys are all gone, all of a sudden I hear one little engine coming from the distance, right? He got stuck in the gate.
Yeah.
So here we are, last place there. And so he goes in after him. And he ends up passing, I think Kyle Lewis had the lead. And he passed him down the back straight over a jump to take that win from way last place.
Wow.
And so I went to his memorial the other day and talked to his mom and everything. I says, if he would have got a good start and won that race, we wouldn't even be talking about it. But to come from last, that's a big deal.
That was something you remember. Yeah, bummer to lose him. You got to have some good stories with him. He was a beast back then, huh?
I love that kid, and I never liked his dad. We couldn't get along for shit. And I had a sticker on my toolbox that said, why be difficult? With a little more effort, you can be impossible. And that fit George,
Yeah.
At some point, we even offered to let Mikey move in with us.
Is that right?
But I think once we did that changed his view of us for some reason. But just hard. One of these guys just don't want to get along, But Mikey was always fine,
Yeah. He had like the toughest exterior, but he was just the
now, I never
guy.
saw none of that stuff, right? He never showed me. That happened more after he left, I think.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that's how I remember him. I didn't know him in the 80 days, but mohawk and tattoos and piercings, he was the punk rock star guy.
And that's how he lost his ride at Suzuki.
Yeah, it is. He told that story. I couldn't believe it.
I've got a picture somewhere with him on a little 50 and my brother in the backyard. He's just a long tow-haired kid riding around in a little 50. So he's been there from the beginning.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Gone too soon though.
Yeah. It's sad. It's really sad. We're kind of getting to that age where we're going to start, losing guys, and it's a bummer.
Well, the death rates never change. Still one per person.
Yeah, I know. It is one per person. It's undefeated, Father Time. Okay, so who else were you working with then from the time Rick, Bruce, and Kyle passed?
I got some names written down here. Because even back at that time, there was a kid named Mark Meredith. I guess he's passed now, too. That's what I heard. And then Bobby Sullivan. You ever heard Bobby?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
He was a San Diego kid. Mark was from Phoenix.
I know Mark Meredith. Yeah, I know that name. I didn't know he worked with you.
Yeah, a great kid.
Huh.
And with Jimmy Johnson, the NASCAR driver, he rode for us for a little while.
Is that right? Through RJ, did he connect you guys?
I think so.
Yeah.
Plus we're down at Barone Oaks all the time down there, and so he'd be racing there. Now I got a story about him that was kind of funny. One of my customers, his name was Irish Sanders.
Okay.
And he was the vice president of Hoosier Tire.
Okay.
And his kid raced motorcycle. And so he was sending stuff out. Well, he called me one time and says, I went to lunch with Tony Stewart and Jimmy Johnson. And they find out, kid races mini bikes. So Jimmy says, you need to be sending your stuff out to R&D Racing. He goes, well, who do you think I sent it to?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
He'd already been sending stuff to you.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, that's a great story. That RJ has pictures of he and Jimmy out riding together and him working with him. And it's like, man, a couple of successful guys.
But that Jimmy Johnson's just likable, because he wasn't a NASCAR driver at first, but he got to know what's the other guy's name that he rode for a long time, famous, just retired not too long ago.
Yeah, I'm brain farting.
But I'm just saying
personable guy.
He must be because they gave him an opportunity. Mm-hmm. That matters.
Yeah, it does. So name some of the other riders. Let me see who else
Okay, so you already talked about George. Okay, you ever heard of Chris Morey? He's another kid we supported.
No.
Well, he's
California kid.
Yeah, and so he's done real well. He's in the legal. He's a lawyer and made well for himself. There was a kid named Eddie Glover that we used to work with years ago, and
no relation to Brock.
No, he had a really cute sister, so that helped get on the team. Yeah, and then we had a kid, Richard Sands, and so his dad Dick Sands. Okay, so there's a story there. Okay, so everybody knows who Paul Feed is, right? Race Tech.
Race Tech.
Well, before there was a Race Tech, there was an S&T Racing, Sands and Theed.
I didn't know that.
Okay, so Paul got his degree, and so he's a young guy. You probably got no money, and at that time, and then, but Dick was a land surveyor and a little older, and he's more successful. So he gets the building, pays the rent or whatever he did, and so they teamed up and opened up that little place. Well, they must have had a rack with like oil, fork oil or whatever. So my buddy Bill, he's a little progressive on the suspension as well, and so he goes over there and he's buying up armloads of suspension fluid, right? And Paul says, "What are you doing with all that oil?" He goes, "I'm revalving my forks." And Paul says, "Why would anybody want to do that?" It's like, isn't that funny?
Yeah, that is funny.
Yeah.
Why would they, Paul? That's funny. Who else you got? Let's keep going through this. That's interesting.
So then we got the Rick Hemme, the Larry Brooks, the Bruce Bunch, Kyle Fleming, Scott Brown, Mike Healy. Okay, there was a Pat Galen. You ever heard of Pat Galen?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Really good little rider.
Okay.
Don't know whatever happened. Had a Mike Pasquarella.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew Mike. His kid raced supermoto with me. Joey, yeah.
Okay. There was a guy, Junior Jackson.
Junior Jackson, yeah.
Okay, now, interesting story there. He seemed like the next great thing, right?
Yeah.
But when I brought him out here, he wasn't really competitive. We were flying him in from back east to go Golden State, and this ain't working out. So that's why I said short term.
Short term.
That didn't last long.
Interesting.
Then after that, we got Buddy and Butch Smith and Jimmy Gaddis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah. The Snowman. So now that's kind of my era. That's when I kind of came in. That must have been early to mid 80s, right? Mid 80s.
And it was funny because I remember hearing, I'm focusing on what I'm doing. And so I hear names over the PA, but I don't know all these kids, right? I hear this Buddy Antonez, right? So I'm thinking some little Mexican kid, right? But one day he walks up to me, introduced himself, right? And he's like, he's kind of like blonde, like dirty blonde hair and green eyes or whatever. I go, never would have made this connection, right?
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a whole lot more thought than I needed a rider.
Is that right?
And so we just hired him and Butch Smith, right? And we're winning the Golden State Series with these two guys, right? I go, wow, we just fell into that one.
Yeah.
And then not too long after that, brought in the Gaddis kid. So that went along pretty good for a while. And then after that was the Jeff DeMint.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the Ezra Lusk thing, there was always this rivalry between Jeff and Ezra.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't ever want to sponsor both of them because it's like such a clash. But Suzuki saw otherwise,
Well, they both got fired from Kawasaki for fighting. You know that story, right?
Yeah. Okay. And so when they end up, I didn't want to hire both of them, but Tosh wanted me to help Ezra anyway. Yeah. So, okay. So there was through Suzuki. He got the same equipment, but it was roundabout.
Okay.
Well, they're paying for it. I'm going to do what I'm told.
Sure.
So that was okay. And then after that, we had Craig Decker and Damon Huffman.
You had Decker? I thought he was a Team Green guy. I guess he was Suzuki.
He rode for me too for a little while.
Oh, okay.
And I'm kind of honest the way I see things, and I share it, but not always well received. Okay. And so when Buddy's riding for me, it didn't matter who was there on a 125 or what they were riding. Factory Honda, it could be Johnny O'Mara. Buddy's turning the same lap times on an 80.
Buddy was incredible.
So this is what I'm familiar with, right? And so when I get new kids on that same equipment, and we're 8 seconds a lap off of the 125 winner, not acceptable. Where are we going to make up 8 seconds? Man, I don't know. But I'm just telling you, that's how far off you are. Well, that don't settle too well,
Yeah.
But that's the reality.
That's interesting. So...
And that would be the end of the riders, I think, that I can remember that I work with.
Yeah, okay.
And after that, again, Yamaha gets involved, and they hook me up with Justin Buckaloo and his family.
As an amateur when he was on mini bikes and
yes,
stuff? Okay.
And man, we had a great success right there.
He did awesome.
And me and that family are just been friends all this time. And then I got a call. His mom passed away.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Me and her were so good, close.
Was this recent?
Like 2 weeks. Yeah, so be going there in a couple of weeks. See them.
Is she in New Mexico or the family
Yes,
still?
New Mexico. Yeah. Justin, I think, is in Phoenix.
Yep. Gosh dang it! I'm sorry to hear that.
She fell and hit her head. She was feeding, the hummingbirds, and she hit her head on a table.
Jeez. That's terrible. I hope he's doing okay. I'll have to reach out. I haven't talked to him in a while. Tell me a little bit more about Budman, because I think if you listed top 5 guys ever to ride a mini bike, he's definitely in the conversation. Probably at the top of the list.
And I use him as an example because a lot of parents think their kids are outgrowing a mini bike. I go, what does your kid weigh? I go, well, Buddy was winning everything at 145 pounds.
Was he really? I guess he was pretty big at the end. Huh?
He lost weight when he got on the 125, got to start training.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a pretty good sized boy. So yeah, don't think your kid's too big.
Huh. There was something, and this will be it's a new feature here we have here, the SKDA style check. I'll never forget my first World Mini I ever went to. It was that track outside of Vegas in Henderson. Remember that place? They had a national there once, I think 85 as well. And you were in this white jumpsuit, which was sort of your trademark. You wore like a full white jumpsuit.
Because once I unzip that, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, it was actually really smart. You could have a suit on under there, be clean and ready to go. But no one else was doing it. And so you were very easy to spot. And you had this thing that you did that at least people in my generation are very familiar with. And I mentioned it and they go, oh yeah, I used to love watching them do that. You'd put the bike on the stand, start it up, put it in gear. I don't know if it was top gear or whatever. You have to take me through it. And you'd have your foot on the brake and you would just hold that sucker, warm it up and then just get it wide open and put a load on the motor, and you could check jetting, you get it warmed up. There was all of these things that you were doing. Explain that to me, because to this day I still don't see anyone doing it.
Well, the whole idea is we don't want to foul a spark plug on the starting line, first of all, because that's not going to work out well. And so what I found was if we warm the bike up ahead of time, they don't want you riding it up and down to blow it out and clean it out. And so I'm kind of stuck here in the pits, right? So I figured out I could do it on the stand just like you're running on a dyno. Just put it top gear and rev it up and start loading that motor. And, and I feel the radiator and just get a feel for it and an ear for it after a while. And I can tell if my jetting's in the ballpark or whatever too, But mostly it's just to clean the thing out and show up ready to go. So when the gate's ready to drop, all they just kick it and start it and go. And that's the best it's going to be.
Yeah. So you would put it in top gear?
Yeah.
Okay. Just so you had less torque, you could kind of manage the RPMs better?
Well, it's a lot jumpier in the lower gear.
Yeah.
But you can control that because you got more leverage.
Yeah.
But it worked out well,
I mean, the whole pits would stop and look over because those bikes were nasty sounding anyway, just crispy. and you're like, "Wah," like revving that thing up.
I'm not even thinking about that, but it said in a message.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was. I think there was probably a psychological thing to it that you didn't even realize.
Well, I remember one time. Now this was on purpose. Is the first year we were at Ponca. It was hot, and so Scotty is going to be the guy to win. And so we'd show up to the starting line with an ice chest, with a gas tank in an ice chest. So it's nice and cold to keep the fuel cold. Carburetor's drained. And so when they're rolling up the line and getting ready to go, we're putting the tank on. So we've got everybody's attention. Everybody's like, what are they doing down there? And so, it was like a guaranteed hole shot,
Yeah.
just from the distraction of it all.
Did it really make a difference?
I don't know, but it got everybody paying attention.
I don't know. Yeah. All right. What are some of your favorite memories from that era? Kind of Antunez, Gaddis, because just a cool era. There was Scott Brown, Tommy Clowers, Joel Albrecht. There's so many kids. Butch Smith, Rick Simmet, Lowell Thompson. Remember those names?
Yeah. Now that you mention it,
I'm missing a bunch, but it was just such a cool time for mini bike racing.
Well, the Schwink is the guy to beat.
Swink, yeah.
And he's riding for Dave Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss Dave Miller. He's gone, right?
Mm-hmm. We tried getting him on, and literally after he and I chatted, maybe a month later he got diagnosed, and then he was gone.
Well, we went down, I think Cynthia, we went to Anaheim here at the Supercross, because he'd always show up to that party that Todd Peterson would put on at that one, TJ Schmidt or whatever it's called.
Okay, yeah.
And we'd go there, and they'd always have a band and this, that. And so this night, it would be the year before all the bad things happened to him.
Okay.
He was there with his wife. And so we took him inside, and we had dinner. And we just started talking, how Dave is. And my phone rings. My kid says, Dad, the main event's on the line. So, well, I guess we're going to miss it.
I'll have to catch the rerun. Yeah.
And so I got to spend that whole evening with him.
I didn't know him real well. Tell me about him. And did you guys, I guess I assumed you guys had kind of a rivalry.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I had heard of him, right? I never had met him at some point. But his brother had a thing called UFO Plastics, and so he could make things out of plastic.
That was his brother. Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was in his home, in his garage, same thing. And so I was having him make things. And one day I'm there talking to John, and here comes Dave walking in with some little sweetie pie, right? And he's heard of me, and I've heard of him, but we never got to meet till right then,
Huh.
He was racing Speedway and stuff back then. And so I remember I said something to him once, and he was never short for words most of the time, but he got really quiet, and he took it completely wrong. I didn't mean it the way it came out, because I was working with George, and then Yamaha had Eric Kehoe,
Mm-hmm.
and they were the race, really, and Kawasaki was Sam's store, and Dave was taking care of Sam's bikes at Kawasaki, and he had them running good, and so he says, well, you got to admit, we gave you a run for your money, and this is where I said the wrong thing. I says, funny thing is I never considered you competition. And he just got quiet, But I wasn't saying his equipment wasn't good. It's just his rider was never going to compete with our guys,
Yeah.
But
I never even heard of that rider. Yeah.
Yeah, but he took that like
personally. Huh?
Yeah, it's like, oops, I didn't mean that, not that way.
Did he do engine tuning? What was his specialty? Because I remember seeing, in fact, it's at Troy Designs, that YZ80 that he built for maybe Eddie Hicks. And
aluminum frame.
Gorgeous.
Dave's an artist.
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing he is. And then he's a gearhead on top of it all. But, an artist doesn't like to do the same thing over and over again. They want to do something different.
Right.
So production was not his thing, like I'm thinking a lot of people benefited, Mitch and everybody, probably from his early efforts making pipes and different things, got people on a certain path.
Yeah. Well, and I had heard a story, and I misrepresented it, that Mitch was making his pipes for him for a while at a point, and Dave actually reached out to me and said, nah, you don't have that right, and I'd like to come. He actually liked to come on the show and tell my side of that, because that's not how it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why I asked what his was was he an engine builder or a pipe builder, or
he could do a lot of
kind of
things.
did it all?
Yeah, and he had a feel for it. He'd go ride it, and he knew what it's supposed to do.
His work was beautiful. The Kawasaki's he built for Swink. I think Swink was a DMC kid. That Yamaha for Hicks. I mean, it's still, you walk in, you go, wow. There's still not 80s that look like that.
No.
85s. It's a work of art. He had disc brakes and all this stuff before they even thought of it.
But he's a craftsman, and so he could weld, he could fabricate, beat, pound. That's a talent.
Yeah. So you guys were good though. I just wondered if you guys had
I like him.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the ultimate compliment one time, maybe more than one time, people would call and say, Dave said, if I was going to have somebody build a motor for me, I'd have Dean do it. And I go, wow, from your own peers, that's about as good as it gets.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. What about you and Mitch Payton? He seems to come up in every show. He's been around so long and so influential. Did you guys ever have a rivalry or good friendship, work together?
Never really had much going on, but I've always liked him.
Yeah.
I just in awe of what he's able to accomplish.
Yeah, of course.
And so, I have friends that are in a similar condition. It's this unfortunate thing, but it brings out the best in them somehow. At the same time, maybe helps keep their mind off the situation too.
Yeah, I think so. Gave him a new focus. The thing, and I respect Mitch.
Well, I heard something the other day, and I'm just going to repeat it. I think it's accurate. I'll take it. One of my customers was at Mammoth, and he says, I always take the bike over and let Mitch, listen to the jetting, right? And so Mitch figures out that it's one of my bikes, right? And so the guy tells me, he says, Mitch says, Dean, I love Dean. I go, that's awesome.
Mitch he's a sweetheart, man. Like, I know he was a little rough early in his days on ride. He demanded a lot, he put in a lot of effort. He expected you to do the same. But that guy is just the sweetest person ever. And I'll tell you, the thing I respect about him most, I've never heard that guy complain once about being in a chair. Think of how difficult it is to get on a plane, travel, get in a rental car, go to your hotel, it's a lot. It's a lot with two, walking your way through it. He'll go to nationals and push his way through the mud. I've never heard that guy complain, not ever one time.
That's amazing. I got put in my place before, and that's down those same lines of that idea, is when Sandy passed away, Rainey, I was at his memorial. And so when it's over with, we're like the last dogs to leave. And so the only ones there is my mom and myself and Wayne in his chair. And my mom starts complaining about stuff, right? And I said to her about, man, really? My friend here's been in a wheelchair for over 20 years now, and you're going to complain about stuff like that? He looks at me and says, you don't know how I feel about being in this chair. I go, you're right. I don't know that. And so he corrected me.
Yeah.
So, but I guarantee you, in Wayne's case, I think he thinks maybe that's where he needed to be to find his relationship with God.
Is that right? Well, yeah, you just assume it's difficult.
Well, he told me, because I've been friends with him a long time, and he finally made it public, a lot of years later. But he told me in the beginning, when he crashed in Italy, he says, I'm laying out there in that field. He says, and the lights were going out. Like that. He says, I knew I was dying. He says, God, don't let me die on this field. He says, all of a sudden the lights went back on. And so his dad told me that when they hauled him into the hospital, the surgeon said, this is the first time I've ever seen a person with that injury where his spine was literally severed like that. I guess the aorta runs right on down through there. And normally when that happens, they bleed out before the doctor ever gets to see him. He says, the first time I've ever seen somebody that wasn't bled out.
Wow. That's heavy. Okay, I'm gonna take a little break on that note. This is your Troy Lee Designs timeout. We'll be right back to keep going here with Dean Dickinson. Stick around.
There's a new product on the market that's going to help you with your riding and racing, and it's Elevate Action Sports. If you've not yet gone and checked it out at elevateactionsports.com, it's a collective of riding coaches, the likes of which has never been put together. Grant Langston, Ryan Hughes, Jeff Emick, Johnny Campbell, and myself, David Pingree, bringing all of our years of experience in professional racing to one place with professionally produced videos, and all kinds of supporting staff to help you with your mental side of racing, your physical side, your bike setup, your bike maintenance. We cover it all. Get to Elevate Action Sports right now and join the community.
Dunlop. There is a reason every AMA championship in the past decade was won on Dunlop tires. They are the best. Choose the best performing tire and a brand that has never wavered in their support of our sport. Choose Dunlop. Pro Circuit. Pro Circuit products are designed with one goal in mind: winning. Through passion and hard work, Pro Circuit has operated the most successful 250 team in the history of the sport. They use that same formula when developing exhaust, engine, and suspension parts for every brand. When only the highest level of performance is acceptable, trust Pro Circuit.
Since 2009, Seat Concepts has been dedicated to making the best aftermarket seats. More comfort, more grip, more riding. For 10 years, we've continued to raise the bar. Innovation and American craftsmanship make Seat Concepts the world-leading manufacturer of power sports seats.
Something from nothing. That's what Nihilo Concepts is about. It starts with a spark, an idea, a concept, which leads to a design, and finishes with engineered excellence with the highest quality products created with durability in mind. All our products are made in the USA at our state-of-the-art facility in Stuart, Florida. Whether you are a weekend warrior, ride for fun, or at the highest level of competition, Nihilo Concepts offers innovative titanium, aluminum, and carbon fiber parts for your dirt bike. We offer a wide variety of products that you can customize to your liking. Browse our site for foot pegs, brake tips, engine components, specialty tools, frame grip tape, lever grips, carbon fiber components, motor stands, our secondary on-switch, plus much more. Head to NihiloConcepts.com and see for yourself why factory teams like Red Bull KTM, Rockstar Husqvarna, Troy Lee Designs Gas, Orange Brigade, Club MX, KLM Gas, and some of the fastest riders in the world choose Nihilo Concepts.
Specialized Bicycles. Specialized leads the way in the world of bicycling. Whether it's cross-country racing, downhill, e-bikes, enduro, road, gravel, dual slalom, dirt jumping, or all mountain bikes that do it all, Specialized has the perfect ride for you. The brand is synonymous with engineering excellence and innovation that steers the industry. Visit your local Specialized dealer for a test ride and see just how good Specialized products are.
I try to keep on keeping on.
With a rich history in motocross, ProX has been dedicated to supplying quality components since 1975. Whether you're rebuilding an engine or just need a new chain, ProX Racing Parts aims to bridge the gap between OE quality and affordability. ProX has over 9,000 part numbers and over 60 different product types that are manufactured by highly reputable or even OEM suppliers and are offered at affordable prices to help keep riders on the bike instead of in the garage. Visit ProX.com to search parts for your bike or check them out at your favorite online or local dealer.
A lot of us have been talking about the Stasic generation of riders, and you forget how quickly things can change in a sport that is as young as motocross. That's 6-7 years that these bikes have been around training riders. So we have a Stasic generation out on the racetrack. A lot of those riders surely were raised on Stasics, and the skills they show are next level. All the things that coaches have been teaching riders on larger motorcycles for decades, they're doing it younger than ever, and it's hard to believe the Stasic generation is already here.
All right, welcome back. That was your Troy Lee Designs timeout. We appreciate those guys being a part of the show. If you haven't seen all of the new gear, new mountain bike gear, the paint department, all things they've got going on, check out troyleydesigns.com. We're stoked to have them be part of the fold here. Getting back into your story here, Dean, I want to ask you, I forgot to ask you this when we were talking about Bruce Bunch, Hemi, and Fleming. Did you happen to see Robert Naughton's bikes that he built?
I did see those.
He built 3 identical replicas of those that year, that 80, and man, they came out really sweet.
Mentioning Bruce, I think this needs to be mentioned. Johnny O'Mara told me before, like he'd be at Golden State Series. He said, I would just watch where Bruce would go. And he says, they always had the best lines.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I used to go do the Kyle Fleming Memorial Race forever, so I knew the name, but I never got to see those kids race. So heard a lot of good things.
One thing that he did that was impressive to me was when I first hired him on, he would set a lot, and he'd ride with his arms like this, and that was working. But when I hooked him up with Myerscough, and they started going practicing together, his whole style, he became Brian.
Oh, is that right?
It's amazing how it transformed his style to something completely different.
Huh. Yeah, well, he was obviously a good student.
Now, something I used to see when I would stay at Brian's house, Brian was a student, right? He watched Roger. What's the other guy's names from Europe?
Joel Robert.
Yeah, he knew all of these guys, right? And Brian's kind of a quiet kid, right? But I'd watch him jump up on his motorcycle on the stand, and he'd assume body positions and say who I am now, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. He knew everybody and what they were doing.
Yeah, those are the guys that figure it out, the ones that are very curious and they study every little detail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess kind of where we're at here in the timeline is, as that the 80s are kind of coming to an end, we're hitting the 90s. At this point, when this list of guys, like you said, Decker, Huffman, you got back into it with Buckaloo there for a little bit, which would have been mid-90s, probably late 90s. It seems like you kind of got out of trying to be in the competitive racing business with a team and that kind of thing, and more so just focusing on the company itself and selling to people who wanted, performance modifications. Was that intentional? Do you miss that? Did you ever kind of pursue that again?
Well, at some point, we've got a vehicle provided for us, right? Suzuki's paying for all that stuff, right? And so without that presence there, and then getting off in other little areas and gone long enough, people forget who you are. Mm-hmm. It's a very transitory group of people. And so, then when I get busy developing a product, well, I'm gone for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then, now I go out there, they don't know who I am, and it's like, well, without somebody out there beating them, week in and week out, pretty hard to break back in that way,
Yeah, I understand. It does move fast.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought that's something that needs to be fixed in our sport. And Rick Johnson's talked a little bit about that, just how he feels like, not that he's expecting people to come and, throw flowers at his feet, but it's like, this is one of the best guys to ever compete in our sport, changed the game in a lot of ways, right? This is McGrath's idol. I mean, I just don't think people appreciate the history of our sport. It's kind of part of why I started this show, to kind of highlight that and spotlight that a little bit, because I think it's important for a sport or a business or anything to really appreciate the folks whose shoulders they're standing on. And you're one of those people, in this sport. And so whether it's a Rick Johnson or it's a guy like yourself or whoever, man, you blink and it's moved on, this sport. It's weird. And the kids, maybe it's because we're a younger sport. We don't force kids to go through college like stick and ball sports would, and maybe they learn a little bit more appreciation for the game. But it's like our athletes, when I had Jet and Hunter on the show, they didn't know who Jeff Matasevich was. I mean, they didn't know. They only knew Johnny O'Mara because he was coaching them. They didn't know anything about what he did, and I'm thinking,
Well, even Roger has made the point years ago that the problem with the American riders is they don't know anything about that equipment that they're riding. Mm. So they don't know about their bike. They obviously don't know the history.
Yeah. And I don't know, from a rider's perspective, it doesn't matter if you know the history, but I don't know. Just seems like.
All I know is I listen to Mike Tyson, and that guy knows all about the guys that came before him. He studied it.
any stick and ball person or mainstream sport athlete, if you ask a baseball fan, hey, what do you know about Babe Ruth or Hank Aaron? Man, they will run you through stats, numbers. They know it. And like you said, Tyson, same thing. He's probably gone back and watched fights of every heavyweight world champion before him, and studied them, and what can he learn from them, Anyway, just something I understand about this sport. I wish it was better.
Well, what you're doing is something I thought of myself, but not necessarily video like this, but I thought, how come we don't interview and keep a record? Because once they're gone.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a lot of value in it. And anyway, I don't want to belabor it, but tell me, this is our seat concepts hot seat question, another feature we've dropped in here. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you sweat here. What was a part or works parts or something you made? What was maybe it could have been a factory part or something you worked with that was the most impressive thing to you in all these years?
Well, the two things for the four-stroke of what come to mind, right? Because before they had the fuel injection, they were carbureted. And so they chose to run the Keehan FCR MX carburetor. And so that thing, to me, had a lot of, how it worked out like this. I wasn't going to mess with a four-stroke until they made it into my mini bike market.
Okay.
So the day Honda hit the showroom floor with that 150 four-stroke, I owned two of them that day. Brought them home. So that means now I own two of everything on that motorcycle, right? Well, Don Lieb, Michael's dad, they got sponsored on those four-strokes. He has a real track out here. Villapoto and Chad Reed, they come practice. Supercross. And he says, Michael's about in tears on this thing. He says he's going to get hurt on it. And he says, what's his name? Ed Brazina, who was the guy that made the Quick Shot and had the patent on it that Boysen licensed. Well, Don Lieb grew up with Ed Brazina. And so he says Ed flew out, and Boysen came out. He said they spent a week here trying this, trying that, never could solve the bog problem. And so that's when, I have two of those bikes at home now. So, something wrong with the carburetor. So I pulled the carburetor off. And so the first thing I look at is how is the fuel being baffled around the main and pilot circuit area, right? And it's really poorly baffled. And so I changed that whole design with just some glue, make something test thing, right? And so I made that bowl with those changes. And so that was going to be test 1. Test 2, because I've got two of everything, I made the second bowl the same. And this one I changed the way the hole patterns were in the pump cover, because to me it looked like the thing would build up a pocket of air. It doesn't bleed out correctly, so I rearranged the holes. And so that would be test 2. So I drove out to this track and put the bowl 1, test 1. Michael goes around, he comes back in, says, you fix it on the first try. Okay, now let's try this setup with the change in the pump. I could hear the difference that made. When he lands and goes, rup, 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 jumps across things, it's so much sharper. And he came back and says, oh, it's a different motorcycle now. I said, okay, take those parts, take them to the machine shop. We're making these, right? And so we made about 4,000 of those, about a billet at first, but it cost, or not cost, it was 45 minutes of time per bowl, machine time, like too slow. And so we need to speed that up. And so I contacted a friend that's in the die-cast business and told him what I needed. And so here's the secret to getting the die casting at the right price. You got to find a machinist that's capable of doing that, that's going through a divorce and doesn't want any of this shit on the books. Okay. That is the key to getting a good deal. And so anyway, long story short, we were able to produce one part. Then you have to do a little bit of machining. But one would come out of the mold. I think he said every 10 seconds or 5 seconds, whatever it was, it spit them out of there, right?
Yeah.
And so that brought the cost down because Boysen was going to come in and try to counteract this, right? Because of the billet ones, he knows that can't be fast. And he's in the investment casting, lost wax business anyway. So that's his method, which is still pretty labor intensive. But I saw a printed copy that he was handing out at some of the shows. They were kind of coming there with their own bowl.
Okay.
But I came in with a die cast. That went away because they could never compete with that then, price-wise, And so that was the thing. And then a lot of people didn't realize all that was going on with the bowl and the pump. They think maybe just the pump cover that would go on a stock bowl because Boysen was making that in a few other places. And so people don't know any better. So I'm losing sales over here because they think that this other little Band-Aid is fixing their problem. They don't realize it's not. And so I made a pump cover that would go on the stock bowl that they were selling for $150. I sold it for $99.95. Didn't make any money on these things, but I just kept making them until they got out of the way with that stuff over there. And then I get rid of that, just start selling my bowl again.
Yeah.
Because people don't know any better, right? This is way better than just that little pump cover.
Right. Wow. Was that just a 150 problem, or was it the same thing on the big bikes too?
That was the thing that was amazing. I didn't realize that at the point. I was just trying to solve the 150. When it was all done and said, it fit on all those models, and they were all having different various degrees of these problems.
Okay.
But as I was learning, I had it designed at some point where it worked perfect on the 150. But on a 450, people are amazing. I'd go to Texas for those 2 rounds that they have races over there. I got a captive audience willing to test stuff in a race. I'll put stuff on there. They'll tell me if it works. I'm going, wow, really? Okay. So
it must have been a bad problem if they're like, it can't get worse. I mean, yeah.
And so I had Doug Dubach test it, right? And he come back and goes, hey, man, this thing's starving for fuel on the main jet, right? Okay, well, I needed to know that, right? And so he was kind of frowning at me a little bit because of that. But I'm learning as I go here because it works on the 150. So I got to figure out one design that works on everything, not a various one for a 150, one for a 450. Sure. That ain't going to work. And so I went down to the Lowe's over there. I've got it in my Kiro cabinet, the box. I bought a little demo grinder and some putty. And so I'm coming back at night at the hotel, changing and grinding and going back to the track the next day till I finally get the right resolve, right? And like I just was mentioning to you, I found that with a bottle of Avion water, just shaking the water and watching how bubbles react. And that's what I realized what I need to change inside there. And that's what finally gave us the fix of that bog problem.
So explain that a little bit. I mean, what are you looking for in the water, in the bubbles? Like
bubbles rise, right? Liquid goes down. And so when they're going over it, say a jump, because the one thing I realize is when they're going across the whoops, seems to run, it doesn't bog, it just across the whoops. And yet I realize that fuel is being agitated, and I know there's air in there, but it's going to make a lot of little bubbles, and it still seems to run on that. Even those little bubbles going through the jet, it doesn't seem to bother it too bad if you got a jetter right. Yet when they go up and over a jump and then come back down, it go up, and then when it bogs right when they land, right? Uh-huh. Well, when you go up and on your way down, you're going to go into more of a negative G, and the fluid's going to switch sides with the air.
Yep.
And so now the air is going to make its way under the jets, and so it's going to suck air for a moment. So I've got to figure out some way, because that's going to be a thing. We can't stop that from happening, but we can stop the air from getting all the way down to where the jets are. And so I changed it in such a way that the air had a heck of a time getting down that far. It turned around before.
So you're just kind of creating a baffle, like you were talking about, where it couldn't make that inversion.
Not a baffle. It was a chamber isolating the main jet and pilot circuit away, and the fuel had to waterfall down into that chamber, and that's where the air, for whatever reason, didn't want to make that corner. It would go back the other way. And somehow that solved it. And it didn't take any baffles. It was just the way I spaced things. The Japanese were doing a beautiful job with baffling. It just wasn't working.
That's interesting. So is there, I imagine creating something like that, like seeing a problem, creating a solution, like that has to feel really good. Does that supersede even like trick one-off stuff, from Japan that you'd see, or hand-built stuff like Dave Miller would make, or factory Honda had, hand-built swing arms, that kind of stuff?
Well, when you're able to solve a problem that their engineers can't fix, it's kind of rewarding.
Yeah.
Way,
Even
if it never made a nickel, it sure feels good to know that all those smart guys couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would bet. Can't speak from experience, but I would bet you're right. So tell me a little bit about your father passing and how did that affect you professionally and personally? I mean, I just lost my dad here this past December, and
I'm sorry.
It's difficult. Yeah, I knew it was coming. He was not in good health for a while, but
God's been really good to me because, he didn't leave here unexpectedly, and it happened gradually.
yeah,
And that makes it easier.
Yeah.
Because you realize it's not going to keep going. I was telling my friend this morning when we were walking, he's not doing well. And so I was talking about my dad. And I said, we took him to that hospital late. So for whatever reason, that emergency room is always full at night. And so we went down there because he's filling up with fluid, see, he's heart congestion.
failure, yeah.
And so they'll poke a hole through the ribs and drain the body cavity, and then he could breathe again, right? So we're going to go down there for this purpose. But it's freezing cold in that waiting room, and it's never going to get in there anytime soon. And so my dad just says, let's just go home and come back tomorrow, right? So, okay, let's go home. So we get him in his room. He's sitting on his bed, and got the window open. And as I pass by his window, what comes to mind was one of these days, I'm going to pass by this window, and he ain't going to be in there no more. And that was the day. That night is when he passed.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so, but it's,
Yeah, it's, Davey Coombs actually said something. And I knew his dad just as a promoter, when I first started racing, but he said, you never really become a man until your dad passes away. And you can't really grasp that until it happens to you. When you want to call him and you're just like,
I've been at the race. I think I was in Texas, and I'm watching some history thing on one of them old NASCAR guys, something Johnson, years ago. Anyway, that's an interesting piece of information. I'm going to reach over and call Dad, right? And I realize, he's not on the other end anymore,
Yeah, that's tough. Did you make any changes to how you did business? Did it change your...
I changed one thing.
Okay.
That garage door, he'd always make sure that door was open all the time because, somebody might think you're not open, if the door's closed. And it gets hot in there sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so I put an air conditioner. I had a new door, a narrow one, and a regular door so I can keep the place cooled off. Yeah? He always thought, you just got to be tough, right? And I go, man, I ain't getting no tougher anymore, right? Let's cool this place off, right?
Yeah, that's funny. Old school mentality, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do you ever think like, maybe I'll make a push back in to try to get into pro racing? Or are you content with what you guys are doing?
Never crosses my mind.
Really? Yeah.
I like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I still have my dyno, and I develop things from time to time, But as far as getting back in at that other level, I never was interested in that in the first place. I like the mini bike stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
They would just drag me in there once in a while, but other than that, I just like doing the amateur stuff, know. And one thing that I've had great success with when I was doing it is I would start off with a 50 rider and work him all the way till the factories took off with him, and then go back and find another 50 rider and just go back through again. Yeah.
That's got to be fun anyway, right? To help a kid succeed and then watch him go on. And, I'm sure as you were watching all these guys that you worked with, the ones that went on to be successful, that had to feel good.
I got to tell you, I've gone to a lot of races. I've seen a lot of riders, and most of the time it's all same old to me. I'm not impressed. Hard to impress me. But when I'm at Anaheim over there, and this kid from Australia showed up, first time in a 250 race, and didn't think he needed to be behind anybody that night, I was impressed.
Yeah.
I thought, man, that is something special. It's like watching Jean-Michel Bayle.
Mm-hmm.
I go, this is a rarity to see that next level.
When he crashed at the end.
Broke his collarbone, but just the fact that he was trying to pass number one again, that's pretty cool,
He was not going to let him go. I know. I thought the same thing. I thought that this kid's, he wants it.
She was sitting there. I jumped out of my seat and cheered. I mean, it takes a lot to get me to jump out of a seat.
Yeah.
But that was special.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing it now. And I think Hayden Deegan is kind of filling that spot in now too.
That is kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of phenomenal because even Bubba mentioned it the other day about he rides like he comes from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That is impressive because normally if you got a little bit of a silver spoon, things come a little easier.
I can't think of another rich kid who has that much grit. I mean, he wants to win bad,
Mm-hmm.
and he's doing the work. He doesn't get tired. he runs his mouth pretty hard. I have mixed feelings about that sometimes, but
Hannah
it's also entertaining.
Hannah said that, sometimes I talk myself into a corner,
Yeah.
But he never said anything he couldn't back up.
That's it. That's the thing. And he is. So it's hard to not like it. It's fun. Good for the sport, I think.
It's just a whole different way of riding a motorcycle than jet, though,
Completely different. Yeah. And we were talking about this a little off camera. That's something I love about this sport, where you've got a Jet Lawrence who is this technically beautiful rider. He's Stefan Everts. He's David Bailey. He's that mold, right? But then you can also have an Eli Tomac or a Hayden Deegan who do it complete opposite. Just heavy-handed and smoking the clutch and panic revving the thing, and you're like, gosh, that's not efficient. But they are winning, and those two can go like this and just knock down, drag out. You can have a Jeff Ward and a David Villeman, like super tall, super short. Doesn't matter. That's something I love about our sport.
It's that want to.
Yeah.
You can't. It ain't for sale.
It's not. I wanted to ask why you guys never got into exhaust. You said you were doing.
I did.
Oh, you did.
I had a whole line of exhaust pipes.
I didn't know that. When was this? Like 70s, 80s?
90s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had a goal.
Okay.
And so I said, I'm going to make the pipe from the 50 to the 500.
Okay.
And so I bought all the competition, ran them all. So I had everything, logged in what it did. And then I measured everybody's pipe. I had all my drawings. I knew what everybody had. And then I'd make mine, right? And so my goal was to outperform them first, fit better, and do it with at least one less cut in that pipe than they did. And I mentioned it to Big Donnie the other day because he's got damaged, and that he hurt himself right a while back. Big Donnie?
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Oh, I didn't know.
Anyway, so I called him and talked for a long time, and I mentioned to him about this one less cut, and frickin' calculated that in his head. He goes, he knew right away how much time that saved, how much money that was, just that one less cut. And so I knew he would appreciate that.
Yeah.
But so, I did all that stuff, and I sold a lot of them, but I'm never going to be able to sell like they do because I'm never going to go that big with it, because they're just already like hit critical mass, let's say.
Yeah. Hard to break into that.
Yeah. But I knew in my mind I could beat them, and I did it. And so that was good enough for me. I didn't lose any money.
And same with suspension. Because you mentioned you were into that for a little bit, but then
quite a bit.
But then, which I thought this was interesting. Your liability insurance said you have to get out of that if you're going to do this.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about, but I was wanting to make throttle bodies anyway. So, but yeah, the suspension thing's an interesting thing, But like somehow I just have a gift sometimes, I think, and if you have a gift and you exercise the gift, you just get better at it, Other than if you don't do that, well, then it's just a waste of time. Why give you a gift, right?
Sure.
And so the suspension thing, I'm not a rider, but I could watch it and see in my mind what I think's going wrong and be able to make those adjustments, And I at some point I could look at the linkage and see what that linkage was going to do just by where the points were. It's like crazy. But I had like this feel for it,
Like beautiful mind, just numbers and calculations.
Whatever. But one thing that I learned that was the way I get a feel for that was you got to drain the oil out of the shock. Okay? Get rid of the oil and just feel what does that thing do? How does that relate to that spring and the leverage? Push it through the stroke. Hard to feel it with the dampening involved, right? It masks over it. So you want to just feel what the linkage is doing first, right? And so once I get that doing what I want it to do, because I would just move points around, and then when I finally came out with what worked and give that to the machinist, they got the pivot points, machine that I'll build it like that. And then we'll lay the dampening over that. But just feel, because it's just a lever and a spring.
So you're looking for the right progression.
Yeah, just like a particular feel, And so I was doing that stuff for Tomac, and I think we had like 10.5 inches of travel in the back, but the ride height wasn't any higher, And then being that he's a bicycle guy and he's friends with Answer and Manitou, they wanted to make something, right, for the forks. And so they made a really nice little cartridge system that would fit into the stock conventional forks on a Kawasaki. But the thing is, they're so used to selling so much volume with bicycle stuff, this never caught on to that degree. So they wanted off of it after a while. So they just sold it all to me, And so I had all that stuff, but still have some of it because the KTM has just dominated the class now, and so nobody rides a Kawasaki.
Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting. Tell me about the jump to 4-strokes. We chatted a little bit about this earlier and off camera a little too, but you had said something earlier in the show that I thought was really right, and that's when it comes to racing, you should keep it as simple as possible, and we definitely haven't done that. You embraced it, to the point, like I said, you're making parts and trying to solve problems and things, but you think it was probably not in the best interest of the sport going that way?
Well, just like Sandy Rainey had said years ago, the people that race motorcycles generally are the guys that build houses and lay concrete, the working people, and so they're not made out of money, so you could price it past their point of purchase, right? So that's where we seem to be headed,
I will say this. I'll give the industry credit here, and there was a manufacturer who I won't name who was asking a lot of the media people, hey, what is the price that we can't go past? Like at what point are we too much, and we all kind of landed on 10 grand. Like you just can't go over 10 grand. It's just too much. And so they've done a really good job. And I know some of the bikes have bumped over that, but they're continuing to add upgrades and still try to hold that line best they can. And it still seems crazy, right? When you're talking about buying an 80 for $600 back in the day, but go buy a bicycle. You buy a high-end mountain bike, you're going to spend 10 grand. So sometimes I think, man, what are we doing? We're way out there with this cost. This is crazy. But if you look at mountain biking, I mean, you can be in just as much.
Now, this might apply, this particular principle. There was a guy, I hadn't seen him in a long time at the races, right? And he shows back up. I said, where you been hiding? He said, I've been installing cell towers, when the cell phone was catching on, right? And I said, well, I got a question. How come in Europe, the Europeans don't pay for incoming calls, but in America we do? He goes, oh, that's easy. Americans are willing to pay for incoming calls. If you're willing to pay, I mean, your wallet is how you're voting, right? Mm-hmm. If you say no more, they'll have to change what they're doing.
That's right. Yeah, in the mountain bike community, they'll pay it. You're right. They've proven it.
They've never sold one to me.
If you make something out of titanium and it saves them 4 ounces, they will buy it.
I'm thinking get a little better shape, and you ain't gonna notice that.
Yeah, have a little cup of coffee and clean yourself out. You just saved more than that. Yeah, that's right. What about the mapping side of things? That's become now probably the most important tool, which seems so crazy to me. It used to be jetting. The jetting was so particular on a 2-stroke, right? I mean, you could be just even an air screw would make a difference on the track of feeling like, man, this thing is just perfect, or it's okay.
Well, what I was doing the jetting for a lot of the 125 guys at Suzuki, depend on how the guy rides the thing off the corner. If he rides a gear high, and there's just different ways of doing things. They required a different setting. It wasn't the same for everybody.
Yeah, it was an art and a science, jetting. But mapping has now become that. It's you can completely change the feel of a bike just by getting on a laptop, and
that's why I liked helping Doug Dubach, right? Because he's completely into the details, right? He can feel everything. And that's fun to work with a guy like that, You have to be on your game, though, because he's going to call it all out if it's wrong, right? And so when I'm working with the throttle body and doing the mapping, I mean, there's all kind of layers in there of things. For example, when I'm doing it on the dyno, you're going to have, like in this case of a vortex box, you got 9 different throttle positions. You're trying to get the air-fuel ratio to be kind of flat, right? And so in the target zone. Well, that's only at stationary throttle. When you're modulating, you got all kind of different dynamics going on, right? And so it's got another layer in there that acts like, say, the accelerator pump. It lays over a little more fuel through certain areas, right? Well, that changes everything, how it feels, And so we're out with Doug, we're moving around little amounts of fuel when he's doing the throttle off a corner just to get a certain thing to happen for him, right? Well, that's pretty hard to do with a carburetor, but this thing has that potential if you could just figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like there aren't a lot of people that have really embraced it. a handful, and they're working for the highest level teams right now.
Well, when I was doing this, see, the whole point was to develop that throttle body. And the throttle body required a whole different thing than the stock one did as far as fuel. And so my approach was to, take a stock bike. Why am I hooked onto something? Take the stock bike, get it mapped in, or just see how it runs. Stock, baseline it all. We got that recorded. Then plug a vortex in. Now let's map that in for the stock throttle body. How good can we get that? So, okay, now for guys that just want a vortex, I've got something they can buy. So the next thing is, once we got that baseline, now let's plug the throttle body in. Well, sometimes, it'll start at idle, but as soon as you turn the throttle, it'll start shooting ducks, right? So I have to go back in and find a different set of fuel timing. In other words, when the fuel gets squirted in, and do something completely different than what the stock one is, and then problem solved. When the fuel goes in. Every little thing is like a lot of complication, but you got to be willing to spend all that time and get really familiar, because it's a feel. Like you ride the motorcycle, that's all. You don't have to think about this, right? It's all in muscle memory at some point.
Feel, yeah.
Same with tuning. You have to be that on it.
But it's like a black magic almost. You have to, like you said, it's trial by error, or trial and error, and then, okay, that didn't work, we'll try here. There's some principles to it, but like you said, you got to just be willing to put the time in.
I'm big enough knucklehead to want to do that kind of thing. Not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah, I hear you. Is there, what is the limit for 4-strokes? I always like to ask, high-end engine tuners like yourself this. With the 2-strokes, and I'd had this conversation with Mitch, he goes, we're kind of at the limit of what we can do really with a 2-stroke motor. We can move it around. We can, there'll be millimeters we can gain here and there, but it's like we had kind of reached the peak of it. Are we there with 4-strokes? Is there more to do? Is there more technology that can, or?
That's a good question, because I'm not really a 4-stroke guy. I'm just faking it. But I just know we can make it, because ultimately you get more power than you need, really, because they've got more displacement probably than they need. Yeah. And so now it's just really make it usable. And that's like what Doug was saying all the time. You make this thing with the stock arrangement, the way that thing is. He says sometimes when he's in a corner, he says I've got to be applying brake, throttle, clutch. He's got to hold your mouth just so to get it to act a certain way. He says, but once we got the throttle body, he says it's all with the throttle. Don't need to do none of this other input. And and it loosens up the suspension. Everything. So the bike handles better now. All that stuff's affected by laying out the smooth power.
Yeah. So it's really more now just become the mapping to make it more rideable, more usable, the way that it applies, right?
It doesn't do any good to spin the tire.
Yeah.
Right? And so I remember my boss at Suzuki years ago used to say, back then it was that the rule of thumb was about 50 horsepower. Anything more than 50 horsepower goes up and spin in the tire on a 2-stroke. Depending on the track, I guess. But yeah, so you got to stay adhered to the ground.
Yeah. Do you think there's a revival potentially coming? You were around when you started. Your dad was building 4-strokes, and then we went 2-strokes. Now we're back to 4-strokes. The electric thing is whatever it's doing. But now we've got 2-stroke, fuel-injected 2-strokes. Is that something you see? Have you messed around with those much?
That's been a problem. Okay, and so here's how this worked out. KTM's got the 125 and 250, 300, fuel-injected. And they've gone through 2 generations now. They had a port-injected one, and now they've moved into the throttle body, which I've been telling you, that's the right place, because that's where the hole's the smallest, the highest airspeed. That's how you get atomization. And so they finally put it back where it should be. But they've got everybody locked out. Okay, you don't have any way to tune that, right? And I've talked to Sal at KTM. I've talked to Roger. Nobody can help me, get me the tools I need. And so I just put that up in prayer and said, you know what? If you want me to work on those, you're going to have to find me a tool, because nobody seems to be able to help me. I just left it like that, right? Well, then one day I got a phone call. A guy I've known for years on the East Coast says, hey, unbeknownst to me, been working on getting into that new box and got a way in. He says, but I don't want to work on motocross bikes. He says, I want to do off-road stuff. He says, you want this stuff? He says, because I'll fly out and bring it. And so the guy flew out, gave me all the stuff, stayed a week, showed me how to operate it, and I just paid him, fed him, and And so now I've got to, and so there, I'm just saying, it got handed to me.
Okay.
When I didn't have no way to make that happen.
Yeah.
It, unbeknownst to me, my friend is working on that project. How about that?
Pretty cool.
And so I've done a little bit of that off and on, but by the time I had that equipment, I think the people that have bought those bikes have had a sour taste from them. And it took too long, so it's hard to bring it back around. But the latest stuff, though, that I've seen, the 25, seem like they've cleaned it up quite a bit, And so
yeah, it just feels like on all of the injected bikes I've ridden, there's like a lean spot, like the jetting changes depending on where you are in the throttle, and it's not.
Carburetor, I think right now is still better.
Yeah, agreed.
Just look at the history of a two-stroke fuel injected. Honda, they in the road racing have already worked on all that stuff years ago, and they went back to a carburetor. If you got all that behind you and you still go back to a carburetor, what does that tell you? And so anyway,
that's a good point. And someone mentioned it's like exhaust temperatures are a big part of the problem.
Changes things, yeah. You go through a river crossing or something else, and the pipe gets cold. Everything's different.
Yeah.
But see, the carburetor is smarter because the carburetor only responds to signal. When the signal changes, the carburetor goes, different signal, different response. The fuel injector, it doesn't understand that. It just does what it's told to do.
So your answer there is probably no, you think? With fuel injected two-strokes, you don't think that's the answer?
Well, I don't think it's the answer, but that looks like the direction they're planning on going.
Interesting. Well, we got pushed out of two-strokes into four-stroke because it was cleaner. I would debate whether that's accurate or not. And even with the electric, you made a really interesting point, again, off camera, but, the fuel in a combustion engine gas tank generates power or energy, right?
On site.
Where a battery cell of the same size just stores it, right? So much more efficient.
Well, I was telling you, the gasoline, a gallon of gas is 100 times more energy dense than a battery of the same size as that gallon of gas. But it doesn't burn at 100% efficiency. It's 30%. So it's only 30 times better, right?
Yeah, that's it. Let's go to electric. What do you think will happen? Let's say we do go electric. That is pushed on us by the EPA or whoever. CARB is basically saying, at least for motor vehicles, by 2030, they aren't going to sell internal combustion engines for road use. Now they'll still sell motocross bikes probably for a while, but you can see the writing on the wall. Mitch has said if it goes full electric, he's probably done. He's not going to make another transition to another thing. What say you?
Well, we already bought a piece of property on a hill in Costa Rica.
You did? You already? Okay.
So we're working on that idea.
Yeah.
Because by the time they do all that, I won't care anymore.
Yeah.
Good
point. Do you think that's...
But see, how they do everything is through conditioning, And so the little kids that are already riding the little electric 50s, well, somewhere along the line, that group won't even never heard of combustion engine.
Yeah.
Right? And this is how they do it. It's a long-term goal. Yeah, and they know how to manipulate the people. So where we live in.
Boiling a frog, right?
It's something like that,
So what's the future of R&D Racing?
I don't know. There is one.
Yeah?
We're running it out right now.
Is that right?
Yeah. For a little bit. I like doing what I'm doing, and I'll just keep doing that while I can,
Yeah.
But don't know. I like I was telling her on the way here, I never had a plan. I just do the best I can each day, and it all just opens itself up to me to whatever it turns into. Yeah. I have never had to worry about all that stuff. Right?
It just seems like you have so much information in here, and I hope that somewhere before you do step out and go, disappear into the hills at Costa Rica.
I spend a lot of time messing with my chickens and washing down after them twice a day,
Yeah, I got my own, dozen over here, so I get it. I just hope that, and I don't know how, but I hope that all of the stuff you got in your brain you can pass along to someone or some other place to.
If it applies, if they change to a whole different technology, it don't really matter, right?
Yeah. What's your life look like these days? What do you guys do for fun, family?
We go out to eat a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you brought me some cookies. You actually make the cookie dough for a really high-end restaurant out here.
Well, I wouldn't call it a high-end. It's high-end food. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a fancy place, but the food is really good.
Yeah.
Because the chef is kind of a friend of mine now, but he used to be the head chef at the Ritz-Carlton in Pasadena. And then in L.A., you know the Twin Towers? We got the Wells Fargo and the Bank of America Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing that connects those two is called Nick and Steph's. It's a restaurant, aged beef steak and steakhouse. And so he was the sous chef there. So, I mean, he's like high end. And so when he asked me to help him, that's like Chef Ramsay asking me to help him.
Yeah.
So it's a feather, you know.
Well, they're amazing cookies. So,
Well, it started off gelato, okay? I wanted to learn how to make gelato.
okay.
And so he's at a different restaurant at that time. And he says, well, I made all the ice cream at the hotel and stuff. And so he would never tell me how, which is what I liked about it. He says, but I'll always give you a professional opinion. So I go home, I work on something, he would critique it, and I'd come back another time and he'd critique it more. And then I got all the way to the place where he says, this is the best ice cream I've ever had.
Is that right? Would he say like, it needs to be a little sweeter? Like, would he give you tips like maybe
Mostly
more sugar?
texture. Mostly about
okay.
the texture of it, you know. And he was cluing me in on things, you know, and how this works, you know. Because, see, the ice cream versus gelato, they're on emulsion. Okay, and so another foam, let's say. And so if you buy a gallon of ice cream, anywhere between, I think it's 30 and 50% air. So if you let it melt, I mean, it only got this much, liquid in
Right.
it. Where gelato is 10% air, so it's a denser product, you see, and that's why it's so rich, you know. And so I wanted to learn how to do that, and so I got my little ice cream maker, and I got a light dimmer, right? And so I could slow that churn down because you're mixing that air in there when it's churning.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Slow that way down, you know, and
You got a factory blender.
yeah, just And when I told him, he goes, "Oh, that's how you did. That's awesome. Just a light dimmer." Yeah, I use the same thing on my mixer, right?
Yeah.
Because you only got so many settings. I just put it wide open and do it with a dimmer.
Oh,
and I
that's
got
hilarious.
multiple settings then, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, yeah. It's just an approach, right? You got a certain approach, take that into different things, you know.
So do you like to cook as well, or is it more just treats and this kind of stuff?
Yeah. I was cooking quite a bit there for a while. I haven't been doing it so much lately. But at some point, it was a really good compliment when my two boys were home. Because I'm working on trying to do good all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so my boys said, Dad, we can't hardly go out to eat no more because that food you make is just so much better. But I haven't really practiced it so much lately. But, yeah.
It's a good skill, right? I mean, I had to learn when I got into the fire service because if you can't cook and it's your turn to cook, you get eaten alive in a firehouse. So I had to learn quick. And
well, like one time I wanted to make a marinara
uh-huh.
because I always liked a meat sauce, right? I've never tasted one without the meat that I didn't care for, right? So much. So anyway, so I'm working on this, and then I get it to a certain point, and then, okay, now let's see if the meat, because the meat just seems to always take it to the next level. Well, this one, once I added the meat, it didn't do anything. It's like we're already there without it. It's like that was my goal. I wanted to be able to get to that place, you know.
And you got there.
Yeah.
I love it. How close do you still follow racing?
I watch it on the
every weekend, pretty much. I mean,
I don't watch TV no more, so I have to wait to show up on the YouTube.
Yep, the YouTube. But you know what's going on. You're
A little bit, you know. I mean, I like what I'm seeing with those Australian kids, though.
Yeah.
But I feel bad for KTM right now. They don't deserve what that's going on there.
Well, yeah, they just won a national championship. Can't be too mad for them.
Yeah, well, that's right.
All right. Well, one of the last questions we ask all our guests is how you want to be remembered in the sport, and I guess yourself and or R&D, your family, kind of legacy. How do you want to be remembered?
I just look at it like I've been the most fortunate guy because I've been around the most talented riders that always make my equipment look better than it is. And that's pretty awesome.
Well, you're, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, your logo, seeing you in that white suit, it's burned in my brain forever. So whatever you did along the way, man, you made some great choices, and the work you've done is incredible.
Well, there's one guy that doesn't get much credit that I've seen so far. Is Jody Weisel.
Okay.
He's been an asset to the whole industry with that motocross action. Really appreciate him.
He's been around a long time, done a lot of stuff. Yeah. Doesn't really like to talk about it. I couldn't get him to come on here.
Okay, I got to let this out of the bag. This is funny. I'm sitting on the bumper of, it's Doug Dubach's box van. So I'm sitting on the bumper.
When
Doug,
is this?
Oh, gosh, this has been 10 years ago. Right?
Okay.
But Doug's sitting in a chair. I'm sitting here. Jody walks up and sits in my lap. I thought, that's awesome, because he don't say much, right? But he just let me know, He appreciates the effort. And so Doug says, he ain't never sat in my lap.
He must really like you, because he doesn't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's good.
I'm lucky to get a look and a handshake out of him.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, man, like I said, I'm you've done project bikes for us. Your approach, which is always kind of simplicity, doing something, don't get crazy, do the fundamentals, but do it really well. I hope I'm not speaking out of school. That's kind of what I took away from your work, and that was one of the funnest 125s I ever built. You remember the Damon Bradshaw replica bike we did? And just from way back in those mini bike days and the impact that you had on the sport to even the stuff you've done for us currently, man. Just big fan of what you've done. So
just remember, bubbles rise and water runs downhill, man. You just don't have to get too far from the basics,
Well, congrats on a heck of a career, and thanks for taking the time to come in.
Thanks for having me.
I sure appreciate it.
That.
Glad to call you a friend. Stick around. That was Dean Dickinson's story. We're going to be back to wrap up the show. All right, guys, welcome back. Hope you guys enjoyed that with Dean Dickinson and R&D. Folks my age probably remember that brand better than the younger crowd, but that is a sharp man. That guy has probably forgotten more about engines and performance modifications than most of us will ever know. So really, really great to have him on. Like I said, a big part of this show is not just entertainment, but hopefully to preserve some of the history of the sport and let these guys tell their story and their tales and things that they've gone through over their years. So we really appreciate it. Folks, support these guys here. You see behind me on this board, all of these sponsors, particularly Yamaha, they've been so good to us. And we really make sure we curate these brands. There's no one supporting this show that isn't an ultra premium brand making the best products in the business. So try to support them. Shoot them a message on Instagram or post something on here and tag them and say you appreciate their support so we can keep this coming to you, because we got a lot of people we'd like to get to, and they make it happen for us. So thank you guys for always tuning in and supporting what we do. We'll see you on the next show.
Yamaha is the industry leader in two-wheeled fun and performance. Celebrating 50 years of YZ in 2024, the Blue Crew is still dominating shootouts and competitions. Yamaha, revs your heart.
Troy Lee Designs is the leader in off-road motocross apparel and style. So whether you're looking for a cool new paint job for your helmet, maybe your name and number on your helmet lettered on, you're looking for new gear, you're looking for mountain bike gear, off-road gear, they've got the brand new Scout line and GP and SE models. Troy Lee Designs has it all. They've been leading this industry for decades, and they're going to continue to do it. Check out TroyLeeDesigns.com. SKDA is a moto graphics and seat covers company with several offices based around the globe. For too long, bikes and graphics have all looked the same. They just start to blend together. SKDA is working to change that. With super clean and unique design work, a bike with SKDA graphics stands out in a crowd and adds a touch of art to the world of moto. Hey, we need that. SKDA prides itself on providing premium customer service both before and after the sale is made. Visit SKDA online to view the current product range and get in touch with their team to get your bike refreshed. I want to just make a mention here that these guys, not only is their design way outside the box, very, very cool. They'll work with you on custom things. The products are incredible. Okay, they'll speak for themselves. But what's really awesome, and you'll notice this the minute you order one of these, man, they give you an email saying, hey, the product's been shipped. Hey, the product is here. It landed in this spot. Hey, it's coming today. Hey, your product's been delivered. They just so good about staying in touch with you and letting you know where it's at. Customer service is 100%, and that's just something that's rare these days. Check out SKDA. Here at the Whiskey Throttle Show, we're all about supporting brands that support our sport. And there's one tire company that has never walked away from the sport of motocross and supercross, and it's Dunlop. When times got tough and the economy took a crash, Dunlop stepped up and stayed with our sport to support it and the athletes and individuals that love it. Their MX-53 line and MX-33 lines absolutely dominate this sport. Every national championship at the pro level has been won in the last decade, and nearly every single amateur national championship at Loretta Lynn's has been won on a Dunlop. So if you're looking for high performance, you're looking for amazing quality, and you're looking to support a brand that never turns its back on our sport, there's only one choice for you, and it's Dunlop. Pro Circuit is the leader in aftermarket performance and quality. Whether you're looking for a little more horsepower out of your engine, some quality hard parts to improve the way your bike feels and looks, better handling through suspension or linkage arms, Pro Circuit is where you need to stop. It's your one-stop shop. You can go in there and get everything you need to make your motorcycle go from average to exceptional. Pro Circuit's got enough number one plates on their wall to side an entire home, and there's a reason for that. They're very, very good at what they do. The highest quality products with one goal in mind, and that's winning. Check out ProCircuit.com. Nihilo Concepts is leading the way in aftermarket hard parts. With their secondary on-switch device, something that was much needed in this sport, they've been innovating and bringing new products to market. Their latest is the new Nihilo Run Cool brake pistons. They're designed to be stronger than stock and provide exceptional cooling performance with less brake drag. Most OEM calipers pistons are made from aluminum that just can't hold up to the heat and extreme demands of serious racing. When they get hot, the aluminum will distort, causing loss of hydraulic pressure and brake failure. Nihilo's Run Cool pistons limit the area that boiling hot hydraulic fluid is able to come in contact with the piston, leaving 2/3 of the piston volume in open air with breather holes to enhance the cooling ability. It's made of a proprietary stainless blend, which is better at dissipating heat. You have issues with brake fade or brake failure, check out Nihilo Concepts among their many amazing hard parts and carbon fiber parts and titanium. NihiloConcepts.com. Seat Concepts is the leader in motorcycle saddles. If you're looking for a new cover or a new seat entirely, Seat Concepts is the place to go. They make custom seat foams catered to your height, weight, riding ability, riding type. They also have waterproof covers and foams that will not break down if you ride in a lot of inclement weather. And they pride themselves on being much more comfortable than OEM or any other aftermarket company. If you're looking for a new seat or a new cover, Seat Concepts, there's nothing better. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than ProX. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, ProX makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the Polaris RZR 800s. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than ProX. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, ProX makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for if you've got a little Grom that's looking to get started in the motorcycle world, the best way to get them going is on a Stasic bike. They've got multiple sizes, so from your very young Groms to those who are a little more grown up, you can start them safely. They've got controls that allow you to control the speed so he can't get going too quick. They can touch the ground. There's not a lot of noise to distract them. It's the perfect way to get your child involved in motorcycling at a very young age. And if you've got a kid who's already out ripping, there's series popping up all over. For those of you in Southern California, go to www.ameminicross.com and join their local series. If you're outside of this state, contact your local track and ask them about starting a Stasic class at your local track. Get over to Stasic.com and check out all they've got going on. And finally, last but not least, Specialized Bicycles. If you are in the market to start pedaling, this is where you want to start. They've got great entry-level bikes all the way up to the Cadillac, the new Levo e-bike, anything in between, man. It doesn't matter what kind of riding you're doing. Go check out and start with Specialized. Don't waste your time on something that's going to break. The derailler's not going to shift after a couple months. Get something quality. These guys make it. Specialized leads that industry.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Whiskey Throttle Show. Be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when new shows go up. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And visit whiskeythrottlemedia.com for additional content.